Now I request Professor Sanjay Acharya to coordinate and moderate this second plenary session.
Thank you, sir.
Esteemed Professor Chairperson of this
Second Utsav Odisha Plenary Session. My teacher, my guide, my mentor, a very distinguished teacher whom students have adored. It gives me immense pleasure, sir, to be here in this session with you, sir. Esteemed Professor Lakshmikanta Mishra, former Professor of History, Ravancha University. Esteemed Professor Harihar Panda, former Professor of History, National Defence Academy, Khadakwasla, Pune. My dear Professor Priyadarshi Kaura from Ravancha. Distinguished members present here, ladies and gentlemen. I deem it a great pleasure to be here today. And at the outset, let me thank the authorities of Utkal University and Institute of Media Studies for having given me this opportunity to be here as a moderator for this session. This session would be revisiting history, our roots, and unsung heroes of Odisha. I would give my final. I should not be extending my talk here. I would request Professor Himanshu Shekhar Patnaik to give his opening remarks. Sir.
Thank you, Professor Acharya. First of all, I am thankful to Utkal University authorities and particularly the Vice Chancellor and the Director of Media Studies for having invited me to this gathering. And I'm indeed grateful to them. I do not know whether I am going to live up to their expectations or not. Coming to my opening remarks, let me be very precise and short. Today is an auspicious day, and we are going to discuss about our roots and about the unsung heroes of Odisha. Now, Odisha is described recently as the best kept secret of India. Why? Those who described it perhaps do not know the reason of it. Now, today is an auspicious day. It is the day on which the sacred log of Lord Jagannath came and landed at the Bay of Bengal for subsequent construction into icons as we see them today. So it is called Niladri Mahodaya. And today is also Madhubabu's Jayanti. And MSD, Madhusudan Das, is the architect of Odia identity. And in fact, he had, though a Christian himself, he had consecrated the land of Odisha to Lord Jagannath. And he had always invoked on the Odias to historically revive the past glory of Odisha. So we have to first of all examine our roots. Let me tell you from the very beginning that the motto of this Utkal Utsav has been Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Now, this Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is a universal spiritual message, not a religious message. I think you know the distinction between religion and spirituality. Now, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam has been translated into Odisha in very many ways. I will give you certain examples before I stop my opening remarks. They say the culture of Jagannath is the culture of Odisha. So Jagannath is the root of Odia identity. And how? Let us say the name itself, Jagannath, Lord of the universe. It is universalism, not particularism of any sort. And then we find in Jagannath Dharma that what is called Mahaprasad of brotherhood, that everybody partakes Mahaprasad equally, irrespective of caste, creed, or religion. You'll be interested to know that in early 18th century, a Persian saint by the name of Sheikh Muhammad Amir Ali had come and visited the temple, gone inside the temple, gone around the Ratnavedi, partook of Mahaprasad with Brahmins and Sudras in Ananda Bajar, and he has written this in his travelogue, whose copy is to be found in the Lumumba University of Moscow and in the Karachi Museum. I got a copy of this from Lumumba University thanks to the efforts of one of my well-wishers, Professor E.N. Komarov. And this shows that there is no caste distinction, no religious distinction. There was at least no distinction. So it believes in the universalism. And Odisha is the seatbed of this universal approach. You look at another thing. The North Indian sages wrote the scriptures. The South Indian sages interpreted the scriptures. And you find the writing and interpretations are synthesized into Jagannath consciousness or Jagannath philosophy, or what we can call Jagannathism. So, this Jagannathism is the root of our identity, and we find that this is the starting point. And recently, you might have observed that at the cost of 250 crore rupees or something more than that, an Odia billionaire in London by the name of Vishwanath Patnaik is going to construct a Jagannath temple in London itself. That reminds me of Pigs, the Christian missionary who wanted to hoist the cross on the 22 steps or Baisi Pahacho of Jagannath temple. Now, thus we find this universalism is gradually spreading, and from Arnold Toynbee to Sri Aurobindo, the prediction seems to be coming true that India is going to emerge as world guru. And behind this world guru concept, the basic fundamental philosophy of Jagannath universalism is apparently conspicuous. And that is how we should trace our roots, that is how we should regale, and that is how, as Madhubabu has said, that we should not forget that we are Utkala Santano, we must revive the old glory of Odisha or Kalinga. Thank you very much. I shall speak in detail later on. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I would request Professor Lakshmikanta Mishra to give his address.
Respected Chairperson, Professor Himanshu Shekhar Patnaik, it's of course a privilege for me to share the chair along with my teacher, and my favorite teacher, of course, the favorite of many, and respected my colleague, Dr. Aryan Ponda, Dr. Sanjay Acharya, Professor Sanjay Acharya, Professor Upendra Padi, Dr. Priyadarshi Karo, and the learned audience. And in fact, the caption of the seminar, so to say, that is revisiting history, our roots and unsung heroes of Odisha. And in fact, the caption itself is quite fascinating. And this is an attempt which, as I understood, is focused upon popular histories, individual histories, popular culture, by exploring hitherto unexplored aspects, explored voices of the voiceless who have always been kept at the margins by the mainstream historians. And mainstream historians during the last 50 years or 70 years or more so have always kept the common people, whether the tribals, peasants, women at the margins, by clubbing them with diseases, criminality, madness, and by attaching many other the adjectives to their the personalities. In any case, the basic objective of such discourses is to start to de-light the existing historiography and to de-burgeoning the existing historiography, and by digging into the archives and learning about the deeds, activities, resistance of the people of Odisha, both in the mass and elite language. And the scholars who have been working for the last 70 years or more so, maybe 60 years or more so, and they have a compendium of volumes on freedom movement in Odisha, which has been massively investigated by them. And the hundreds of PhD theses have been produced in different parts of Odisha by different universities. And of course, and in their theses, they might have focused upon many unknown heroes and unknown unsung heroes of the freedom struggle. And you know that everyone is familiar with the personality of Bakshi Jagabandhu Vidyadhar. And but very few of us, and particularly very few of us know about the other personalities associated with the this Pike rebellion of 1817. One is Padmanabha Chotrai, who belonged to Bhubaneswar. He was the commander of the fort of the Badagada, and he was hanged to death. You know that a person, Bakshi Jagabandhu Vidyadhara, because of his position in the the feudal structure of the Khordha state, and provided the leadership, and when support came from different quarters, and he became prominent, and but the people who sacrificed their life and saw it, and they remained unsung, and people didn't bother about them. Similar is the case of Pindiki Bahubhalendra, and that means this about Pindiki Bahubhalendra, who had also led his life during, and Bakshi Jagabandhu Vidyadhara, you know that he didn't lay his life. However, he suffered a lot, and that is a different thing. And we have Krutivasa Patsani from Banpur who declared independence for 3 days in 1837. 1837. And in that case also, so the people like Sarana Singh was hanged, and many other people. So the many of his associates were hanged, and we have we have certain popular writings, and essentially done by Niharanjan Patnaik and the Jagannath Patnaik, and Niharanjan Patnaik's Lakhana Naik. So they had received the attention of great scholars like Bipan Chandra, and the Bipan Chandra, while making a criticism of the criticism of the work in his book Ideology and Politics in Modern India, he had stated, and I am coming over to the concluding part of the concluding part of the remark, and he had stated that Lakhon Naik's role was to make him a legendary figure in Odisha, and he deserves to be known in the rest of our country. This is the statement given by the Bipan Chandra in this book. And Dr. Patnaik's study fulfills the need of the hour, and it is the people who are the crux of the matter. And Dr. Patnaik fulfilled that the mission. And Jagannath, and he had written enormous articles on different on different issues, different events, and different different heroes, and like that of Nirmala Munda. And Nirmala Munda, who had led this Simcoe, the Simcoe revolt. And you know that Simcoe revolt was more ghastly than that of the Iram massacre, which received a due attention. Iram massacre, which had been written down by Jagannath Patnaik, Nihar Patnaik's father. And that received the attention, and because that book received the Sahitya Academy Award, and there are problems associated with it, and however, the 42 people died in the Simcoe Andolana, led by led by Nirmala Munda, whereas in that Iram 29 people were killed. And the coincidence is that this Iram massacre is being described as mini Jallianwala Bagh, and in any case, mini Jallianwala Bagh, because of the sheer coincidence that both the places have only one opening, a single opening, and 3 sides being closed, and that is there in Jallianwala Bagh and also in at Iram. And the Jagannath Patnaik had written a number of books, Raktatirtha Iram, Biplabi Dharanidhara, Odisha Swadhinata Sangramare Odisha Amar Sahid, Adunika Odisha Baraputra, likewise. And however, Professor Himanshu Patnaik had made a very aptly stated by stating that from the pioneers of journalism in Odisha, like Gauri Shankar Rai, G.S. Rai, and S.K. Mahatab, to individual firebrands like Vaikundranath De, Somnath Singh, P.C. Bansdeo, poet Bansanidhi Mahanti, and from unsung heroes like Bhagavan Sahu, Aniruddha Mahanti, Ratnakara, Padmanabha Chotrai, and legions of them like Pindiki Balu Padandra, to valiant tribal leaders and dedicated nationalists like Dora Bisoi, Chakra Bisoi, Kashti Dakwa of Nayagada fame, Ratna Naik, Dharanidhara Bhuya, from Dalit leader, the Utsav Malik of Nimapada to the Kalbaked of martyrs, and leaders like Biplabi Chakhi Kuntia, Surendra Sai, Bagajatin, Bakshi Jagabandhu, Joy Rajguru, Lakhana Naik, Khudiram Bose, Baji Raut, Nirmala Munda have all been dealt with in their proper historico-individual perspectives in individual articles. And strangely, Professor H.S. Patnaik missed out, maybe, maybe he had not seen the book, Odisha, Swadhana Sangramari Amar Sahid, the great names of Madhav Singh, Hate Singh, Pujan Singh, Vairi Singh, Salinga Ram Singh, who led life fighting for the cause of the people, such as the Gons and Binjals. In the whole of the 1857 revolt, and this Ghese revolt is the unique one where Madhav Singh suffered. So the Madhav Singh caused the suffering of the people as his own. And you know that Sambalpur was occupied in 1849, and in 1852 the first settlement was made, and revenue demand was increased by 8 times, and it was not possible on the part of the tribals to part with the revenue. And he came forward. He said that you carry on agriculture, I will pay the taxes and the rents. And he fought against the British, and his entire family was perished. And they are the real heroes, and I don't know. So the Professor Patnaik, with due respect to him, and how he missed out these personalities, I don't know. And in any case, there are so many figures. And before winding up my discussion, I will just tell you about two important the aspects. One is in the preface to the book, Swadhanata Sangramare Amar Sahid, what Jagannath Patnaik is writing. In course of his visit to places for the collection of materials, he visited one village where he saw two statues, and below it, it is written Sahid so and so, and Sahid so and so, date of birth and date of death is written. And when he inquired about it, he found out that both of them died in a class conflict, and they have been described as Sahids. And in case of Iram massacre, about which he had written Iram of Tekanda, and the people virtually thronged to his place and demanded that they should be provided with certificates so that they can apply for the freedom fighters' pension. And last year only, in August 14, 2021, I was invited to a seminar conducted by the one doctor from Lakshmi Sagar area, B.N. Patnaik, and in memory of his father. And in 2021, a film was produced by him, and the name of the film is Shahid Raghu Sardar. Shahid Raghu Sardar. He had written 2 books on Shahid Raghu Sardar, and he virtually asked me that you become the chief speaker on the occasion, and would be happy. Then I have about 3 months of time, sometime around from June, I discussed about with my colleagues. And for the collection of materials, I discussed the matter with some of the great leading historians of India who had worked on communal violences, but particularly the great Calcutta killings that occurred on August 20, 1900. The 46, and you know that the direct action day started on August 16, observed on August 16, 1946, and Calcutta riots started. And I discussed with Suranjan Das, with Anvesarai, who is in Kingsport College, Rakesh Patpial. I went to their works, talked to them personally, and all of them had stated that so the violence has continued till August 9. August 9. And on August 9, Gandhi arrived at Sudepur Ashram in Calcutta. And from August 9, there were no violences. There might have been some stray incidents, but what is being described in the film, as well as in the books written by written by Vishwanath Patnaik himself, hundreds of the lashes, corpses were virtually dead bodies were scattered in the Kidarpur area on the morning of August 15. This was completely wrong. This was based on the sheer imagination. This was completely wrong. And whatever, if he had died, he might have died on August 13. And when this, the Gandhi moved from Sudepur Ashram to Beliaghat, where he stayed along with Suravardi. And you see, this is again a very problematic thing in regard to the individual histories. There are many things which can be recounted, and with this I wind up my discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I would request Professor Hariyar Panda to deliver his talk. I would request all the speakers to kindly limit your talk to 10, maximum 12 minutes. Thank you.
Venerated President of the session, my revered teacher, Professor Himangshu Shekhar Patnaik sir, the co-speakers, Professor Lakshmikant Mishra and Dr. Priyadarshi Kar, moderator, Professor Sanjay Acharya, and the coordinator of the whole drama, Mr. Upendra Padhi from the Institute of Media Studies, learned faculties, invitees, and my dear students. Paucity of time will definitely prevent me to give a vivid picture in connection with revisiting history, our roots and unsung heroes of Odisha. A little bit skeptic I shall be in the matter, because not only heroes, there were also heroines, there were boys, there were girls also. So the unsung personalities we will be taking into consideration in due course of time. Now coming to the roots, what were the roots? And these roots cannot be studied isolatedly or in isolation. Rather, it is having an pan-Indian ambience, and I begin with that. When we talk of Akhanda Bharata, Udaram yad samudrasya himadrishya dakshinam varsham tata bharato nama bharati yatra santati. The country that lies between the great Himalayas and Kanyakumari is known as Bharat, and we all are her children. So this very concept of a motherland is the root of this pan-Indian mechanism that is there. And furthermore, if we take our Vedas, Upanishads, we will find what Swami Vivekananda had once told. Utisthata, Jagrata, Prapya Varan Nibodhata, arise, awake and stop not till the goal is reached. The same thing in a different way was told by Father of Nation, Mahatma Gandhi, that Gita is not only my Bible or Quran, it is my mother, it is my mother. That is the thing that he told. While carrying out the revolutionary activities there at Bengal, on the pages of Yugantar, Aurobindo, not Sri Aurobindo by that time, but Aurobindo, the terrorist in colonial terminology and the extreme nationalist in our terms, had told the recurrent cry of Sri Krishna to Arjuna insists on the struggle. Fight and overthrow your enemies. That is the thing, that is a root which we should not forget. Coming to this togetherness, what Veda had told, all these things, I am skipping off due to paucity of time. And the military glory, starting from ancient India via medieval till present, will be taken into consideration. I am fascinated by Chand Bardai's Prithviraj Raso, where the technique he had told that such is the distance where Ghori sits. I quote, चार बांस 24 गज अंगुल अष्ट प्रमाण ते पर बैठा घोरी मत चुके चौहान. And there was a shot and all these things whatever they are in the narration. And respect to women is another root of our culture, which we should not relegate to distant background. Yatra naryastu pujyante ramyante tatra devata. Thus goes the proverbial saying. And in the same way, same things are found in Odisha as the roots. And what are these things? In Kalika Purana, it has been described, the glory of Odisha has been described in no uncertain terms. It has been stated in this way, Varshanang Bharata Srestha Desanang Utkala Smruta Utkalasya Samo Desa Desa Nasti Mohitale. This is our credibility. This is our root that we should proud of. Our rivers, our mountains, all have been praised in no uncertain terms in scriptures. Mahabharata says, this says Lomasa, advises the Pandavas to go and take a dip in holy Boitrani river and all your sins will be washed away. Tato Boitraning Gachet, Sarva Papa Pramochaning, Biraja Kshetrama Sadhya, Birajati Jatha Sasi. In the same way, starting from the eastern Gangas and the Soiladbhava time, Mount Mahendra, or what we say Mahendragiri, which is the abode of Gokarneswara Shiva, has been praised in all the things, which is one of the roots of our culture. Mahendra, Malaya, Saiha, Suktiman, Riksha Parvata, Vindhyascha, Paripatrascha, Sapti, Bhaktra, Kulachala. The first and foremost of clan mountains is Mahendra of our land. And similarly, since time is short, I shall be coming to discuss the main part of the thing. And this route, we also had our military glories. We had our paikas, their formation, Bihoj, and all these things were there. And further, the very term Kalinga Sahasika in Panini's Vyakarana and Ma Bibihi Bhadre Nadi Ustarasthane Sahasika Kalinga of Vasudeva Ratha's Ganga Vangsanu Charitam all speak highly the glory of our roots in Odisha. Furthermore, the temples, art, architecture, sculpture, all bear the epithet Kalingan style of art, which has created a separate entity, which is the root of our own culture, and for which we are proud today, we feel proud today, not only in India, but before the world. Now, very quickly, within 2 minutes, I shall be giving you the idea regarding the unsung aspects only. I will not delve deep into the sung personalities. I will talk only the unsung personalities. I will not talk of Lakshmi Bai. I will talk of Jhalkar Bai. We forget the lady who took the guise of Lakshmi Bai and fought against the British and allowed Lakshmi Bai to move through back door was she sacrificed her life. She was a Jhalkar Bai. And in a similar manner, we find Maviran Alagomuthokana of Kottalangulam, Tamil Nadu, which fought against the British in 1759. As a member of ICHR, files have been put before us, declare us as the first war of independence, starting from Tamil Nadu, starting from Odisha, starting from, say, Bengal, and from Punjab. So, we took a decision that which is one, which came first. No, we will say history of resistance in common parlance, and perhaps that will be the panacea to the great problem that lies before us. And similarly, when we find in the great revolt, we forget a neglected hero Bahadur Shah Jafar, who had given a very thing which instills new vim and vitality into the nerves of the Indians. When interviewed by the American journalist in association with the translator, he had told, "Gajiyon mein bur rahegi, jab talak म्यान की, तखत ए London tak चलेगी, tag Hindustan की." As long as the last blood is in the drop, till that time, the sword of India will pierce the hearts of London time and again, which had instilled all these things. So, coming from many other things that we know, maybe Khudiram Bose, maybe Prafulla Chakhi, maybe the Sukhdev, and and many say Udham Singh and Surya Sen, many they had created their identity but relegated to distant ground by the colonial historians, and time has come to resurrect them and to bring them to limelight for the posterity, for the new generation. Perhaps that will be a great tribute to history. The last part of my talk concerning Odisha, the unsung heroes, heroines, and children. So what Professor Mishra was saying, that Bakshi Jagabandhu, Pindi Ki Bahubalendra, and Padmanabh Chutrai, all the things that we have neglected, we have to study. That including Joy Rajguru and the first martyr of the struggle against the British, and we should not forget about that. And what was saying that Ratna Nayak and subsequently Dhananjay Nayak and Nirmala Munda, but they are a great personality, Madri Kalu, who has been neglected. And he had certain magics, he was creating, the Britishers were fearing, and all these things are to be taken. Then another very neglected aspect, not revealed till yet, I am talking of, is the role of Tammadora and Koya uprising in Korukunda near Subalaya of Malkanagiri district. There, after Bangara Devi, who was resisting British, the Koyas rose against Tammadora, and ultimately he was shot dead. Then we cannot forget the contribution of Rindo Maji, who took the revolt against the British there at Kalahandi. And similarly, I am talking of, I am cautious, within 2 to 3 minutes I shall finish. So we are talking of Baji Raut of Dhenkanal and Nilkantpur, how he didn't allow the British to cross them river Brahmani. And similarly, that we find when his body was burning there at Cuttack, that Khannagar cremation ground, Sachi Raut Rai, who sat there, the great poet laureate, who wrote, "Nuhe bandhu nuhe ya chita, e desho timira tale e mukoti oliva salita, nuhe ya joli jiva pai, ear janam kali jali podi debaku dhasai." Baji Raut came to limelight when a film was prepared on him, The Martyr Boat Boy, which created unflagging support from all over world, and such a thing has been revealed, and we are not keeping Baji Raut in the course. Similarly, I will talk about a lady, that lady who was a part and parcel of INA of Subhash Chandra Bose, Lakshmi Panda, Indira Panda, whatever we can talk her. And she was there at Rangoon. Father and mother died with the British bombardment, went to Subhash Chandra Bose, and persuasion became a part of Rani Lakshmi regiment. and when she was presented before she was set free. And in a similar manner, what Professor say Mishra was saying, Hati Singh, Kunjal Singh, on all the things. I went to cellular jail, Andaman, and I searched there the records on Hate Singh, who was given there are Hate Singh, he was speaking Hati Singh, who was there, he was sent to Andaman. But later on, I knew that by that time cellular jail was not built, and he was sent to Viper Island in Andaman, where he breathed his last. And he, in association with Kunjal Singh, had killed many British officers, and that is why in Sambalpur area today the sayings Hati Singh, Kunjal Singh, Bandle Due Meli, Bedra Manke Mar Dele Enk Chahata Guli is still prevalent, and we are following it in that way. So, in a similar manner, we should not forget Pori Bewa, what he was talking of the lady, the first martyr of the Quit India movement at Basudevpur, say Melana Podia, who has been immortalized in the writings of Professor Jagannath Patnaik, Rakta Tirtha Iram. Similarly, Mayadhar Bhuya, Saunti Malik, Haribandhu Ponda, Sanand Swai, and all others are to be studied. The basic fact remains. What is these things? The colonial historiographers, they have neglected these aspects, these hidden aspects, on two grounds. One ground, that they were marginalized people and nobody knew about them. And second, if they will be brought to limelight, perhaps the path of glory will diminish so far as the British Empire was concerned. So that is why they have not brought to limelight. Time has come. Not only these heroes, but we should also bring to limelight the heroines, the children, those who had taken part in the freedom struggle for which Odisha feels proud, including the Banar Sena and all other things, which have been sent to a distant background, and we will revive it in a due course of time. Perhaps that will be a lasting tribute to the historiography of Odisha. I thank and congratulate the organizers for organizing the theme when we are on the threshold of observing G20 inside the country, and on the fag end of this celebration of Amrit Mahotsav. With this, I thank you all for giving me a patient hearing. Jai Hind, Vande Utkalan.
Thank you, sir, for your delivery. I would now request Professor Priyadarshi Kara to deliver his address.
A very warm good afternoon to all of you present here. My esteemed chairperson, Professor Patnaik, my esteemed teachers, Hari sir, Lakshmi sir, Sanjay sir, all esteemed members of Utkal University faculty, all esteemed scholars of the dais, all my young friends, Professor Upendra Padhi, Director, Institute of Media Studies. I'm immensely proud and honored to be here on this occasion of celebrating Utkal Utsav and sharing my views on a very pertinent topic that the organizers have chosen to deliberate on. Friends, I will not repeat what other my esteemed speakers have said. I will very quickly, within 10 minutes, try to share my thoughts on the theme and then talk or raise more questions than answers. Because I think today it is important to raise questions at a time when the debates on nationalism, the debates on the usefulness of history, the debates on who is a national or who is an anti-national is very much in the air. There are three dimensions of this topic. One is that revisiting history. Now, when you talk about revisiting history, you have to ask a very fundamental question. Is there a need to revisit history? The answer to this question, I shall argue, yes, that history is not a static discipline. It's a source-based discipline, and it also moves with time. And every historian looks at the past from the prism of the present, and every historian, being a product of his own times, is bound to reflect the concerns and the problems of his own times. And therefore, we are constantly looking at the past from the perspective of the present. And in the current perspective, it is important that history has become a doormat. History has become a play tool with everybody. Politicians, bureaucrats, what's of university people, media. Anybody can take history very lightly. But please understand, history has its own protocol. History has its own disciplinary values. It has its own what we call historian's craft. And when we talk about rewriting history, revisiting history, yes, history has to be rewritten, because every age, every time we unearth new sources, every time we deal with new perspectives, new frameworks, new theories, new questions are being asked. So when you talk about revisiting history, every current generation has a duty to look at the way history has been narrativized by the future generation, because every time we look out the past, we look out historiographical debates, narratives which tell us how history has been written. Because when you look at modern history writing, you'll always find modern history writing began in India with the colonial historiography. But I think Hari sir and Lakshmi sir were blaming the colonial historiography for not giving enough due to the unsung heroes or the way history was written. Actually, history was in service of justifying colonialism in the case of colonial historiography. But I am asking a question: how the nationalist historians done justice to the way they have written history? That is a big question. Nationalist historians have also picked up selective people to justify or counter the arguments of the colonial historiography. Therefore, what I'm trying to say, that when Marxist historiography came, subaltern historiography came, new ways of questioning, new ways of revisiting the old narratives began to come, we began to write a different kind of history. So constantly, as students of history or as teachers of history or those who are doing history have to be very aware of the way historical narratives are constructed in every time, in every phase, and how we go and unravel new eras, new realms of history, new unexplored dimensions of history by asking new questions, by using new frameworks, by using new theoretical models, and by also using technology to critically look at the sources we are using. So there are a lot of things to be done. In that sense, the way history is being served to us has become very problematic. Now, the other fundamental question with the issue of revisiting history is, what is the function of a historian? Does a historian have a specific social function? Can historian explain social change? Can a historian is empowered to explain to the people how society has evolved over time? Historian has a specific social function as organic intellectuals or intellectuals who are embedded in the production process or are embedded with the people. They don't only talk about how history is constructed. They also mobilize people. They also understand popular psyche, and therefore the need for rewriting history also envisages redefining the role of the historian, and the way history is being solved to us, it has become very problematic. When you talk about the history of Odisha, if you look at the way history of Odisha has been written so far, there are many gaps and there are many problems. If one goes for a serious historiographical inquiry into the way history of Odisha has been depicted in the mainstream books that are narrating, you'll find there are many gaps, there are problems of methodology, there are problems of framework, there are problems of providing a continuous and a very organic narrative. Why? Because we have not stuck to the basic rudimentary procedural aspects of history writing. And therefore, I would request all of you who are here, who take history out of interest or passion, to look into the way history is written and not be biased by the way history is solved to us through WhatsApp University, through the way politicians discuss, or the way in the domain of media history is discussed. The second aspect which I would like to talk about is about the issue of our roots. Who are these Odias? Who are these Kalingas? How do define our roots? Our roots have to be understood in terms of our language, our demographic details, our racial profile, our cultural lineage, and our ethnic origins. Do we use these yardsticks to understand who we are? You look at history of Odisha, you see Odisha till say 19th century when British took over Odisha from the Marathas in 1803, the history of Odisha was not written in any way. Odisha was just a geographical expression. Now when history of Odisha was being written by all these colonial historiographers, we had some idea about history, and that history was contested by the nationalist historians. But I'm saying, to understand our roots, what are the ways in which we can say who are these Odias? Is it a homogeneous community? Can this Odia language, which became the criteria for defining who is an Odia, the issue of Odia linguistic identity, on the basis of which Odisha became the first state to become the first linguistic province in 1936, is that the only criteria through which we have to define our regional identity? Or how does Odia nationalism was contesting with Bangla nationalism, Telugu nationalism, Hindi nationalism in the context of the language debates? So I think that a lot of this is a very complex issue. So when you talk about identity, when you talk about the roots, historian has to take into account these criteria to redefine who we are. And if you look at the kind of researches that has been done to understand our roots, basically the wonderful research outpourings of the two ORP, Odisha Research Project by the German Research Council 1970 to 75 and 1990 and 2004. If you look at the kind of prodigious historical works, research works, which has been produced by them, you will find there is a hint to understand who we are. I'll take two examples and quickly talk about roots and come back to the issue of unsung heroes. One is the Jagannath cult. There's a beautiful book which is the product of the past ORP called Jagannath Cult and the Regional Tradition of Odisha, where the taking Jagannath as a central point, historians, both Odia historians and historians across the globe, have tried to understand how the evolution of Jagannath cult can give us a clue or a insight into understand the Odia identity and the way our roots can be historicized. And the other thing that he talks about in that particular book is that how a tribal god like Jagannath becomes the Purushottama or the Rashtra Devata of the Odias. And if you critically look at that narrative by Herman Kulke and all these people who are a part of this ORP1 in 1970s, you'll find that we had a large and embedded tribal heritage. Today, if you look at the census report, look at the demographic profile of in Odisha, you will find around 23%, nearly about 1/4 of Odishan population are tribals. We have a huge tribal heritage which are there embedded in our cultural roots. And to my mind, if you look at and go a little earlier and before, if you go to the pre-colonial times, I'm sure a larger portion of Odias belong to the tribals. But how many of us really go back and look back to our tribal lineage, to our tribal pedigree? And the most neglected aspects, the most unsung heroes, if you look at the way our history has been written, you will find that many people who belong to the tribal communities or the Byzantine tribes called Dalits, and a large number of workers, large number of women whose role in history was equally significant, equally momentous. They don't have any mention. They don't have any. There's no way to reconstruct their history in the way we are supposed to. In the way, at least at the national level, the Marxist historians or the subaltern historians have attempted to attempt. I'm not saying I'm dogmatic about Marxism. For me, Marxism is just a brilliant methodology. I'm not being dogmatic about it, but I'm saying they are useful tools. So when you talk about Odishan history or Odishan historiography, we talk about Odishan roots. I think it is important not only to talk about the binary between the nationalist and the colonial historiography, but also to look at the other schools of thought and see the historical events in the lens of these new frameworks, new useful frameworks, which has not been properly or adequately used by the Odisha historians or historians and scholars of Odisha. Number two, the last point which I would like to talk about is that who are these unsung heroes? Today is a very auspicious day, as President Sir told us, that today is the birthday of our Utkal Gaurav Madhusudan. You know, how many of you can know, how many of you can say that Madhusudan is known
And we have written enough about Madhusudan. We have sung enough history of Madhusudan Das, the grand old man of India, who was the pivot of the Odia movement, whose contribution to Odishan history, heritage, identity is immense. It is sorry state of affairs. We have not done justice to the great heroes who have been sung enough, we think, adequately in the historiographical narratives of Odisha. Look at Madhusudan, look at Krishan Gadapati, look at Gopabandhu. Even all these Rama Devi or Namaksha Chaudhary, even enough has not been done on that. So I am saying that there is a need to rewrite history. There is a need to look at the way the heroes about whom we think we have written enough. Enough has not been written about that. Therefore, this kind of history are very deeply embedded, deeply connected with our regional identity. So there is a need for historians, there is a need for scholars to look at the way the history of these song heroes, quote unquote song heroes, has been written. And I'll come back to one or two examples and go back, because, sir, can I take 2 more minutes? If you look back, I was talking about our tribal heritage, I was talking about our Jagannath cult, I was talking about our roots, I was talking about the role of historians, I was talking about how history or historiographical narratives are prepared and they are disseminated, because the kind of history that we serve in our textbooks or in the universities, in the colleges or in the schools, they are consumed by our hapless, unsuspecting students and the general public. So we have a role to play to write history in a more secular and scientific perspective, so that it becomes more acceptable, more universal. But when you talk about universality, when you talk about that the homogeneity, it cannot be universal, it cannot be homogeneous, because every region, every individual, every historical event has its own historicity. We cannot generalize about people of, say, 30 million people or say 4 crore people in a homogeneous fashion. So this very idea of history writing, generating critical thinking in us, must empower us to look critically at the events. It is not, for me, I think it is not very important to, only write about heroes and heroines or the unsung heroes or the song heroes. It is more important to write about people and to look at the discipline of history from the perspective of looking at historical processes, historical events, and to see history as a continuous dialogue between the historian and his facts, to see history as a discipline that could answer our queries, as a discipline which could probably enlighten us, which could provide us a lot of insight to understand who we are, to understand our identity, to understand our heritage, to understand our origin and pedigree. I think that kind of history is lacking, and I think I'm very thankful to IMS and Professor Padi and his team for organizing this wonderful theme, that we need to revisit this, yes, but revisit history in a fashion that will not generate sectarianism, that will not make us parochial, that will not make us only look at few heroes and heroines. I'll cite one more example. Sir was talking about Lakshmi Panda. Sir was talking, and you see how Lakshmi Panda was discovered. Lakshmi Panda, this nameless Odia woman who participated actively fighting the INA in Burma and in Southeast Asia with Netaji Subhash Bose, was found cleaning utensils in one household. And there is Mr. Dheer who found her out, and finally, the way that narrative came, the documentary we can see in the YouTube about Lakshmi Panda. So what happened after that? Lakshmi Panda appeared and disappeared. She died in a couple of years back. So how do you look at the kind of history of Lakshmi Panda, who was one Odia woman, nameless Odia woman, even Indira Panda, who participated in the great revolt, in the great struggle for independence, along with Netaji Subhash Bose in Southeast Asia. There is a need to think, if we say that we'll write about unsung heroes, how do you do that? One example comes to my mind. When the history of freedom movement was written, 5-6 historians from JNU, they went across the country. I am not here to advocate one school of history. I do not belong to any political party. I do not profess or my allegiance to a particular ideology. I'm saying in general, role of historian has become very, very important, because you see, when history of freedom movement was being written, these historians, young scholars, PhD scholars, they went around the country to talk to freedom fighters of all over the country, and the oral narratives, the recorded interviews, and the questionnaire they carried got a huge insight. They were astonished to see school teachers, basically school teachers, village pradhans, common people, and the freedom fighters whose name is not there in the list of freedom fighters, who never got a bhatta for their participation in freedom struggle. they got a huge amount of recorded history from these people. And that was used to write a kind of history. I think that book, which is called, titled the India Struggle for Independence, published in 1988, is a book which has integrated the insights of these oral testimonies collected from across the country through serious field work. I think a similar exercise in Odisha needs to be taken when young scholars and all teachers, all historians, sociologists, anthropologists, all those who do social science need to go around the nooks and corners of the 30 districts and ask questions with a structured questionnaire, ask questions only to those people who are living, or who have, at least those freedom fighters who are living, and to integrate their insights into the national narrative. This is one. And number two, you see, if you go on to talk about the unsung heroes, there'll be many such people who will come. But the problem is, how do you write their histories? How do you integrate, how do you locate these unsung heroes in the historical narratives of the region, state? And there you need to talk about oral sources. You need to be more rigorous. You need to sift fantasy from fiction, fantasy from real history based on sources. Then that would solve our purpose. But if everybody will go on building hagiographies, if everybody will go on, talking about Kendrapada, Jagatsinghpur, Odisha, Sambalpur, Sonpur, and start preparing this will create more chauvinism, and this kind of a history would be less relevant than to a history. See, if you ask me, do we need nationalism? Yes, we need nationalism, because we needed nationalism at a time when nationalism was in service of the project of nation building. But today, there are two things. I'll end with one thing: being political and being politically correct, being historical and become historically correct, which means that we cannot escape politics. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, politics is there very much embedded in our social existence. Whether we vote in the elections or not, the politics of the age, we are bound to affect us. But the point is, we have to be politically correct. And when I say you cannot escape politics, you cannot escape history also, because history is very embedded in our social fabric in such a inextricable fashion. It is very difficult to get him. So when you read history, when do history, and you cannot escape history, we need to be historically correct. And to be historically correct and politically correct, we need to critically look at the way history is being served to us. In that sense, revisiting history is a very challenging proposition, not only for the professional historians, but for everyone who takes up history. So my request, my appeal to all of you and to the young people who are here, there is don't get imprisoned by ideology. Don't get imprisoned by, don't have this WhatsApp university as your source for understanding history. Rather, read texts, read sources, be familiar with sources, know what a historian does when he or she cooks up a narrative, and then we need to rethink about history, and then only history will serve us the purpose of explaining social change and empower us to become citizens who will recognize the plurality of our civilizational ethos, who will recognize the heterogeneity of our cultural ethos, who will try to give us a new identity, who will also believe in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and this kind of celebrating our diversities are not source of our weakness. Our diversities are a source of our strength. And let us today take a place to celebrate this diversity, this plurality, this polyphonic nationalism, and then only singing of the unsung heroes will be meaningful in that context. With this, I'll stop and appeal that all of you should look at history more critically, and history should generate critical thinking and not just be swayed by the way history is being served to us through various unscrupulous means. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Kaura. Now I would request Professor Himanshu Shekhar Patnaik to give his closing remarks.
My esteemed co-panelists on the dais, respected colleagues in the audience, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'm thankful to Professor Lakshmikant Mishra, Professor Harihar Panda, and Professor Priyadarshi Kaur for having broadened my horizon about the unsung heroes of history and the roots of our identity. I have a few things just to add to what uh, Dr. Koro had said. He has raised a vital point, but I will come to that later. Firstly, let me point out that these unsung heroes, we are hearing today in this seminar, thanks to the Utkal University and the Director of Media Studies, thanks to them, we are hearing for the first time the footfalls of those old heroes and heroines who have been semi-forgotten or totally forgotten. Their memory echoes in us today as we are held in a dilemma. Dilemma is the variegated pattern of their personal achievements, how to fix them up in a particular complicated mosaic of history today. Now, this is one difficult task. Suppose the unsung and sung heroes, everybody mentioned about, everybody gave a list of the heroes. Some have been omitted, some have been highlighted. One particular gross omission I found was the case of Himmat Rai, who was a member of the first Panch Khalsa constituted by Guru Gobind Singh. And Guru Gobind Singh asked his Khalsa members, who is going to sacrifice his life for the sake of the country? And Himmat Rai from Odisha was the first one to stand up and suggest that I am prepared to sacrifice my life. Now, therefore, whether unsung or sung heroes, we find that each of them carried an aura or a charisma around them, and each was having his own separate stream of thought, a separate enigmatic zeal, separate nerve of steel, and separate identity and reflexes and reflections about contemporary times. Now, about the question raised by uh, my esteemed colleague, Professor Priyadarshi Kaur, he raised valid points that history has to be written. Every age has the necessity of rewriting its own history. But the tragedy is that there is a saying in English, doctors differ. And that can be borrowed to historical domain, that historians differ more than the doctors. No two historians have the same bent of mind. And it is said that God cannot change the past, but a historian can change the past. So that is how they have described it. Now, anyway, how to accommodate, how to synthesize these various historical personalities and their achievements into a synchronic whole. The methodology is more important than the prescription for rewriting history. And what is the methodology? I have three suggestions in continuation of what Dr. Rock had said. And the first suggestion is the what we can call the dialogical. The dialogical aspect is that which examines the truth of a particular background the historian is studying, the researcher is studying, the truth of a particular background. So whether that event or that statement or the event as it is painted is true to its genesis or not, that has to be verified first of all. That would be the dialogical element. The second is the what we can call the deconstructive element. Whether the researcher knows that what he has found is really true in the context of the social structure of that time. So if it is relevant, if there is a causal connection, if there is a necessary hypothetical conjunction between the object of study and the social consciousness of that time, then it should be the second method adopted for rewriting history. The third method for rewriting history would be contextualist. The contextualist approach should be that we should be conscious of the context and the context, how it is relevant, and how the researcher understands the concept or the context in the context of what he is writing, and that is the substance and the context have to be properly balanced mutually. So these are the three methods to be adopted for writing or rewriting a scientific history. Now, this is how we find that history has lacked so far this proper methodology, and we have not had the guts to write scientific history as it is called. And historians are differing more than the doctors, primarily because of the fact that each historian is backed by his own concepts, his own preconceived notions, which is very, very unscientific approach. And therefore, we should approach with a free mind. So far as the popular revolts are concerned, we should approach each popular revolt and each unsung hero in the context of what he was, what was his relevance, what were his contributions. Say, for example, in the context of language, we know about Odia movement, but Gauri Shankar Rai, he is glorified in many glorious eulogistic terms. Odia movement, that is valid, but there are some unsung heroes like Nilamani Vidyaratna and Balabhadra Supaka. They have not been highlighted in any book of history so far. They need their due place in history. Similarly, so far as the nationalism or the Odia contributions to nationalist struggle is concerned, we have neglected so many. Take the case of Jagabandhu Singh. Take the case of Sarala Devi. Take the case of Bhagirathi Mahapatra. Take the case of Rajkrishna Bose. Take the case of Swami Vichitrananda Das. Their roles, these are only a few examples. Their roles were no way less significant than the roles of the much idolized leaders of nationalist movement. So this is how we find we have neglected so many: language, nationalism, sports, literature, and many other aspects we have neglected so far. And regarding history, history is not a compendium of only political or historical events regarding society or society or culture. Our identity has to be re-established. Unfortunately, I may say that Odia identity or Odia roots have been well illustrated by foreigners than by Indians or Odias so far. I'll give you one example. Vasco da Gama's memoirs mentions that his ship was accosted to Cochin by Kalingan ships, Kalingan boats. Similarly, maritime activities, the much vaunted maritime activities of ancient Odisha, those have to be elaborately studied from Chinese sources. Indian sources have not glorified that. Primary lacuna behind all this is that we are too humble to write about ourselves. Humility is ingrained in us. It is in our DNA, starting from Kapuso and Volluko, right up to today. We are humble. We believe in humanism. We do not believe in beating our own drum. So that is how our roots have come to be neglected, have come to be ignored or sidelined in the context of others. Look at Kalinga Sea. Kalinga Sea is now Bay of Bengal, and we regale about it instead of highlighting how much, till what time it was Kalinga Sea, and when it was converted to Bay of Bengal. So these things have to be tackled as per the three methodological prescriptions I have suggested. The historians should rewrite history from these points of view. That would be very akin to a scientific approach to history. Thank you so much. I am really grateful to all those who remembered this old man for this function, and I am also thankful to my esteemed co-panelists for having enlightened me about many things, and Professor Dr. Acharya for his kind words. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your concluding remarks. Before concluding this session, I would very briefly talk about what the panelist sir has done it, but as a moderator for this session, first I would talk about Professor Lakshmikanta Mishra. He talked about mainstream historians, that those historians have kept the general people in the margins. That's absolutely true, sir. That they have continued the earlier thought. Whatever was going on, they continued with that process. And he talked about Bakshi Jagabandhu, excellent reference to Professor Nihar Patnaik and Professor Jagannath Patnaik, and gave a list of unsung heroes of Odisha for us to know. Professor Hariyar Panda, he said that in his talk that roots cannot be discussed independently. That's true, sir, that when we talk about history, local history is a thread which has to be interwoven into the national thread. And that is exactly what you said, that it should not be discussed independently, to be discussed in the pan-Indian context. You very beautifully referred to the Vedas and the Gita, talked about our roots in ancient text, spoke on the colonial historians and their outlook towards Indians. Professor Gaurav raised some very, very pertinent points, questions. Is there a need to rewrite history? And absolutely, very aptly, he said, yes, that is needed. Talked about colonial historians, the nationalist historians that have the done. He talked about the colonial historians, that how they have written about us, and again went back to talk about the nationalist historians, and very aptly maybe he said that have they done justice in their writing. The talk was very inspiring, that the need of the time is to understand ourselves, our identity, defining who we are. Thank you for your very introspective talk. The chairman of this session, Professor Patnaik, HS Patnaik, Himanshu sir, I'm sorry, Himanshu sir will daku. He's been my teacher, and sir, jo suggestion that he offered, the 3 suggestions, I think they are very, very relevant in the present context of revisiting history. This apart, as a student of history, I'll take 3-4 minutes more. We still have about 10 minutes to go. I would like to raise a few points here. I have my teacher, I'm the moderator of this session, not normally to speak, but I would raise a few questions. What is the relevance of the study of history? Is it possible to do without history on the part of any nation or state? The importance of history as a narrative in the ultimate analysis is a story about the past based on very carefully examined evidence. It has been said that history is the organized story of the whole human past. Experience tells us that this story cannot be told with the help of only what is written down. Written records can tell us only part of the story. As we move back in time to explore remoter past, we have to look for other kind of evidences, and it is here that the study of oral history, as mentioned, archives, and archaeology assumes tremendous significance. It would be a mistake to think that archaeology reveals only the source of ancient society and has nothing to contribute to our understanding of contemporary history. It illuminates the more recent past by telling us new things about for that matter. The emphasis has now shifted from the government to the people, from administrative history to socio-cultural and economic history. That is where regional history, that is where local history has assumed importance. Instead of emphasizing the contribution of Clive or Cornwallis, we have to emphasize the role of Indians in our freedom struggle or in our social reform movement. I think all of you will agree that local or regional history is part of what we create finally in the Indian context. In the context of Odisha, I would very briefly say that it may safely be said that local history has not received the importance it eminently deserves. We have tended to study European history at the expense of Indian history. In the process, the study of history has been deeply impoverished. The retrieval of lived experience of communities in the past, rooted in specific localities, would have enriched national history and provided new perspectives on events and historical figures whom we have taken for granted. As Sir just was saying, that there are many people whom we should have considered in our writing of history, which we have not done. Local history, for that matter, regional history is not regionalism. One has to be very careful in saying what regionalism is than talking about local history. National history can only be written in detail on the history of various regions. And each region is nothing but narrative of the local. I'll just briefly, all members have talked about British historians. I'll also point out a few points, things that maybe we have never thought of. British historians emphasized on the modern period. I do not want to give details about James Mill, about Elphinstons and others. These historians at the formative stage wanted to depict India on the eve of British conquest worse than Europe in the medieval period. I am quoting these sentences. With a prejudiced mind, they could not find anything good in our society. The same approach is seen even a person by the name of W. Hunter, which all of us know, has done excellent work on Odisha, 2 volumes on Odisha. But when he starts looking at us, when he starts looking at Odisha, we see a very strong bias. And I'm quoting him. He says that to the world's roll call of heroes, Odisha provides no names, no contribution. And he goes to an extent of writing that even they are incapable of taming their rivers. Just think what he's writing. That they are incapable of taming their rivers, bringing misery by way of flood and famine. This is how they have looked at us. They write about Oriental despotism, but they were not aware, probably, of the republics that ancient India had. My co-panelists have already discussed about Jallianwala Bagh massacre. Odisha also needs its place in the national history. And all of us, we know that during Quit India movement, more than 28 people died as a result of firing in a remote village in Odisha. I mean, at Eram in Bhadrak district. Similarly, all of us, we know about the salt satyagraha at Dandi in Gujarat. But how many of us, we know about that Odisha is second to Gujarat as far as salt satyagraha is concerned? I'm talking about Inchuri. Life is, I believe, lived locally. The global is an abstraction. Now we have come to an age where we say that globalization, that is absolutely necessary. But I think that globalization, that very word is like living in that is an abstraction. So to neglect local history, we become victims of abstraction, which maybe we are doing. We have mostly seen our history from an outsider's perspective. It is time for us to revisit history again. And in this context, this session assumes a lot of importance and significance. We must thank Utkal University and the Institute of Media Studies, Professor Padi, for having organized this session to talk about our roots. Thank you, sir. I would, like before, I would, sir, we'll give the mementos and then we can, I'll have the vote of thanks. Okay. It's a very customary duty on my part to give a vote of thanks to all the panelists who are present here. The chairman, Professor Himanshu Patnaik, it was indeed a pleasure, sir, to have you here with us today in this university to grace this occasion as the chairperson. It's an excellent experience that we are having here to have you here with us. I'm not sure how many of us have attended his class. He was a wonderful teacher. He kept his students spellbound. He kept his students spellbound in the class, and I'm one of them. Thank you, sir, for gracing this occasion with us today. Professor Lakshmikanta Mishra, sir, thank you for being here with us despite your tight schedule and guiding Ravencha at every point of time. Whenever I go to Ravencha, sir is there. Thank you, sir, for coming here to this forum to deliver your talk on roots of our civilization and the unsung heroes. Thank you, sir. Professor Hariyar Panda, I know him as a student. He was 2 years my junior in Ravencha. 2 year or 1 year? 1 year, right. He was 1 year my junior in Ravencha. He went away from Odisha to Khadakwasla to teach in the Defense Academy, and now he's back here. He's a member now of the Indian Historical Research, ICHR, right. Thank you for gracing this occasion as one of the panelists. And Dr. Priyadarshi Kaurab, thank you for being here with us. Priyadarshi, he's Professor Priyadarshi Kaurab, but Mutan Priyadarshi will narrate. That is my equation with him. I was the first, I think I called him, Upendra Babu Mata Kahila Pare, I called him that you must come. Among Majire, when I went out and told him that you talk on a very important top point, which maybe we are missing out, that is the necessity to rewrite history. And thank you for having discussed this issue of rewriting history very beautifully. Thank you, Professor Padi. आपको धन्यवाद देवी कि कौन कही भी ठीक करी पाउनी. Thank you, sir, for having organized this in collaboration with Utkal University. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Professor Lakshmikanta Mishra, he has immensely contributed to Ravencha University, Ravencha College, to the Department of History.
এই সেশনର ଚେୟାରମ୍ୟାନ୍ ଆଉ ସମସ୍ତ ପ୍ୟାନେଲର ଏବଂ ମଡରେଟର ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କୁ ମୁଁ आंतरिक धन्यवाद जनाऊँ कृतज्ञता जनाऊँ ये द्वितीय अधिवेशन आमर ये शेष है या खूब शीघ्र 2-3 मिनट भितर आम आमर तृतीय अधिवेशन आरंभ करवा। Friends, thanks for your patience. As per the schedules of the Utsav Odisha, now we'll start the third plenary session of Utsav Odisha Day 1. Now I request Professor Ajit Kumar Mahanti, the chairperson of this third plenary session, to come to dais. Professor Surjanarayan Mishra, Honorable panel speaker of this session, to come to dais, and Sri Girish Swami, moderator and coordinator of this session, to come to dais. And we are extremely sorry to say you another two panel speakers, Haraprasad Das and Kamalakant Das, because of their busy schedule and some urgent and important work, they could not able to join with us. They have regretted, and that regret message I am conveying you all. I hope you all will bear with us. So now I request Girish Chandra Swami, the moderator and coordinator of this third plenary session, to moderate and coordinate this session.
शुभ अपराह्न आम समस्त को स्वागत करुचु वेलकम ऑल द delegates and participants and students, researchers and eminent academicians to this grand occasion. And this is really a great opportunity for us that Utkal University along with Institute of Media Studies has been hosting this program for 2 days. Today and tomorrow it will be held here. Lot many things are happening in Bhubaneswar. You must be knowing. Today also we concluded the G20 working group meeting at Bhubaneswar, where so many ministers from Government of India also attended. Bhubaneswar has now found a place in the global map for education and international development. Not only for the reason that we uh, house the premier university of the state, the only university which has been named after the state, Utkal University. You find all other universities are named after particular places. This is the only university which is named after Utkal. So the founders of this university promoted that this university must promote global knowledge and global environment. Institute of Media Studies, one of the leading institute for promoting journalism, mass communication and social work in the state of Odisha, has been pioneering many such events in the state, and we are really proud for the fact that IMS is collaborating along with Utkal University to organize this function. Professor Upendra Padi deserves all thanks from all quarters for taking a lot of pain. Madam Mitali Madam is also there, the Director of Students Welfare, who has been coordinating youth welfare activities in this great university. I welcome. Before I start the session, I would take this opportunity of introducing the guests. Ajira এই ଅପରାହ୍ନରେ ଯେଉଁ ଅଧିବେଶନ ଆୟୋଜନ କରାଯାଉଛି ଆଜିର ଅତିଥିମାନଙ୍କୁ ମୁଁ ବିଶେଷ ଭାବରେ ଆନନ୍ଦିତ ଏଥିପାଇଁ ଯେ ଆଜି ଇଣ୍ଟ୍ରୋଡ୍ୟୁସ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ମୋତେ କୁହାଯାଇଛି ଦୁଇ ଜଣ ବିଶିଷ୍ଟ ପ୍ରଫେସର ଯେଉଁମାନଙ୍କ ପାଖରେ ଆମେ ଛାତ୍ର ହେଇକିରି ପଢୁଥିଲୁ ଆଉ ଯେଉଁମାନଙ୍କର ଇଣ୍ଟ୍ରୋଡକ୍ସନ ଆବଶ୍ୟକତା ନାହିଁ। ପ୍ରଫେସର ସୂର୍ଯ୍ୟନାରାୟଣ ମିଶ୍ର ଏବଂ ପ୍ରଫେସର ଅଜିତ ମହାନ୍ତି need no introduction in Utkal University. Professor Ajit Mahanti for so many years taught in this university in the Department of Psychology. Professor Ajit Mahanti also taught in Jawaharlal Nehru University and in many advanced centers of learning in the country and outside the country. Professor Suryanarayan Mishra, the household name in the Department of Political Science, who has all the data in the fingertips. When Professor Suryanarayan Mishra was teaching the students of our batch, we were finding the constitution in action and history in a movement. He was never referring to any notes, any books or any documents. Professor Ajit Mahanti also is a brilliant teacher, and so many times we have attended his guest lectures in other departments, and Professor Ajit Mahanti also addresses several sessions. He is a regular panelist. Both of them are regular panelists in television. You must have seen Professor Suryanarayan Mishra and Professor Ajit Mahanti in Doordarshan, OTV, several other channels. So they need no introduction. With this, I introduce the theme in short. G20 is now a buzzword. You must be knowing the country. We should start naming after the alphabets. In A, it is Australia, and which is the other country? Australia, Argentina, and in B, it's Brazil. In C, it is China and Canada, and in E, it is European Union. In F, it's France, and then in M, it's Mexico. In R, it's Russia, and in S3, South Africa, South Africa, South Korea, and in U, UK and USA, and in T, one I am missing, T, Turkey. So there was a time when these countries were dominating their respective areas, but they were not recognized for the reason that in the Human Development Index prepared by United Nations Development Programs, countries like Sweden, Finland, Norway, Netherlands, they were occupying all the top positions. But this G20 has very less to do with the typical Human Development Index. This G20 is basically for the economic cooperation and economic development. As Satya Sai Baba said, it's a everything ends in economics. So economics has come up as the most important factor. Everything starts with economics. So G20 started with a meeting of the finance ministers and governors of central banks. And the first meeting was held in Berlin, you must be knowing. And after that, every year the central bank governors and the finance ministers of various G20 nations are sitting together. India hosted the first meeting of the central bank governors and the finance ministers in 2002, and in 2008 it was raised to the level of a summit. Actually it was earlier a conference, but it became a summit जोटा आम शीर्ष बा शिखर सम्मेलन कहूँ सेटा 2008 रु आरंभ होइछि. And now European Union, you now find India is emerging as one of the pioneering force. आमे गोटे समय विश्वर नेतृत्व एमती भी नहीं आपण देखंतु आज इकोनॉमिक्स रो सब डेवलपमेंट हेइछि गोटे छोट कथारू शून्य जीरो रो आविष्कार. जीरो नथिले हिसाबटा केते डिफिकल्ट हेइतांदा. आर्यभट्ट जीरो बाहर कले बोली आज विश्व गोटे आडे गति कला. सेमती अर्थनीति रे भी अधिकांश बाट भारत देखैछि. आज भी डेवलपिंग इकोनॉमी को जदि प्रगतिशील राष्ट्र को जदि किए मार्गदर्शन देइथाय सेटा भारत. कोरोना समय रे आपण देखिथिबे बहु विश्वर बहु प्रगतिशील राष्ट्र अर्थनीति डूबी गला. कोरोना समय रे बहुत प्रगतिशील राष्ट्र लोक डेड बॉडी लाश जीवजंतु लाश भलिया पड़ी रहिला, किंतु भारत आतंकित हेलानी, भारत व्यथित हेलानी. भारत बरं अन्य मानक पई दिग्दर्शक साजिला. भारत रो औषध प्रगतिशील राष्ट्र मानक गला. उन्नत राष्ट्र माने मध्ये भारत रो टीका को डिपेंड कले. तेणु आमे केतरा देश रे केतरा जिंस नेतृत्व नकु. मु गोटे उदाहरण ओडिसा रो देबी, जेहेतु उत्कल विश्वविद्यालय परिसर रे आमे एठी ठिया हिचु. गोटे छोट उदाहरण देखंतु. खंडपड़ा भलिया गोटे छोट जगह रे जन्म होइतिबा जने तथाकथित कौनसी फॉर्मल एजुकेशन पाई नथिबा व्यक्ति महामहोपाध्याय सामंत चंद्रशेखर महापात्र, जहां को आमे शॉर्ट रे पठाणी सामंत डाकुछु, गोटे बही लिखिथिले सिद्धांत दर्पण. आमे सेतले सिद्धांत दर्पण भाबुथुलु गोटे कोन गाँ रे गोटे कवि भलिया लिखिथिबे. सेतरे सब विभिन्न काव्य वर्णना थिबो. उपेंद्र भंजन को लेखा पढ़ला भलिया बुझु न बुझु कि पढ़ी देई कि बुझिबु. मु परे बुझिली टाटा स्टील कॉर्पोरेट कम्युनिकेशन पई काम कला बेले थरे गोटे जो युव ज्योतिर्विज्ञानी प्रतियोगिता रे अवार्ड दिया गला सिद्धांत दर्पण सब पिला एते मोटा गोटे बही. अब आपण आश्चर्य हेबे इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ मैथमेटिक्स जोटा सरकार करिसेंती चंदका पाखरे, जोटी एडवांस मैथमेटिक्स रो कोर्स दिया जाउची. तार पोस्ट पीजी रो एडवांस पोस्ट ग्रेजुएट कोर्स रे सिद्धांत दर्पण पढ़ा जाउची, जहा को तथाकथित मैथमेटिक्स रो बड़ बड़ प्रोफेसर सॉल्व करिया को भय करछन. सिद्धांत दर्पण हेबो नाही लय, नर देहे थिबो जाबत हृदय. कोन से लिखिचंदी आज भी लोक ताको कोऑर्डिनेट करछन. तेणु ओडिसा रे भी बहुत संस्कृति रे आमे जो वसुधैव कुटुंबकम रो कथा उठुची. आपण जदि ओडिसा रे वसुधैव कुटुंबकम रो वार्ता देखिबे, ए उत्कल विश्वविद्यालय प्रतिष्ठा रे जो मानकर मुख्य भूमिका थिला, मु दी जनकर ना कहबी. ए कार्यक्रम आरंभ करिया पूर्वरु जने उत्कलमणि गोपबंधु दास समाज सेवार मूर्तिमंत प्रतीक, आउ जने उत्कल गौरव मधुसूदन दास एवं आउ जने महाराजा श्रीरामचंद्र भंजदेव. आपण जहाँ का नारे उत्कल यूनिवर्सिटी प्रेस स्थापन करा जाइछि, महाराजा श्रीरामचंद्र भंज प्रेस, जो थिरा हमर उत्कल यूनिवर्सिटी सब डॉक्यूमेंट छपा होतिला. मु दी जनकर ना गोटे गोटे पदरे कहबी. उत्कलमणि पंडित गोपबंधु दास गोटे धाड़ी कहिथिले, आ सेटा होछि मु सर्वप्रथम जने मनुष्य, तापरे जने भारतीय, परिशेष रे जने ओडिया. उत्कलमणि गोपबंधु दास ओडिसा रो बड़ प्रशंसक थिले. सी चाहिथिले कहि परथांते जे मु आगो ओडिया, तापरे भारतीय, तापरे विश्ववासी. ना, मु सर्वप्रथम मनुष्य, तापरे भारतीय ओ परिशेष रे जने ओडिया. ତେଣୁ ତାଙ୍କ ଭିତରେ ମହାଭାରତୀୟତାର ଚିନ୍ତାଧାରା ଥିଲା, ଯୋଉଟା ସ୍ୱାମୀ ବିବେକାନନ୍ଦ କହିଲେ ଯେ ସମୁଦ୍ରର ଜଳରାଶିରେ ଅଗଣିତ ବିଚ୍ଛୁରିତ ଜଳକଣିକା ଥାନ୍ତି, କିନ୍ତୁ ଯେତେବେଳେ ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣିମାର ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣଚନ୍ଦ୍ର ଆକର୍ଷଣରେ ବିଶାଳ ତରଙ୍ଗ ଉଠେ, এই କ୍ଷୁଦ୍ର ଜଳକଣିକା ମାନେ ସେମାନଙ୍କର ସ୍ଥିତି ହରେଇ ମହାଭାରତୀୟର ଚିନ୍ତାଧାରାରେ ବିଲୀନ ହେଇଯାନ୍ତି। ତେଣୁ ଉତ୍କଳମଣି ଗୋପବନ୍ଧୁ ଦାସ ସେଇଆ କହିଥିଲେ। ଆଉ ଏବେ ଆସିବା ଉତ୍କଳ ଗୌରବ ମଧୁସୂଦନ ଦାସ, ଗୋଟେ ସୁପ୍ତ ଓଡିଆ ଜାତିକୁ ଜାଗ୍ରତ କରି ସେତେବେଳେ ଗ୍ଲୋବାଲ ଚିନ୍ତାଧାରା ଦେବେ। ଦେଖନ୍ତୁ ଆଜି ମଧୁବାବୁଙ୍କର ଜନ୍ମଦିନ 28, ଆଜି ଗୋଟେ ବଢିଆ ଦିନରେ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟକ୍ରମ ଆୟୋଜନ କରାଯାଉଛି। ପ୍ରଥମ ଗ୍ଲୋବାଲ ଚିନ୍ତାଧାରା ଓଡିଶାକୁ ଆଣିଥିଲେ ଉତ୍କଳ ଗୌରବ ମଧୁସୂଦନ ଦାସ, ଫାଷ୍ଟ ବାରିଷ୍ଟର to complete law in the Cambridge University, ପ୍ରଥମ ବିଦେଶ ଫେରନ୍ତା, ପ୍ରଥମ ଆଇନଜୀବୀ, ଯାହାଙ୍କ ପାଇଁ ଆଜି ଆଇନଜୀବୀ ଦିବସ ପାଳନ କରାଯାଉଛି। କିନ୍ତୁ ଦେଖନ୍ତୁ ମଧୁବାବୁ ସେତେବେଳେ ବି ବିଶ୍ୱବାସୀଙ୍କୁ ଓଡିଶାର ମହତ୍ଵ କେମିତି ଜଣେଇଥିଲେ। ଆପଣ ଗୋଟିଏ ଛୋଟ ଉଦାହରଣ ଜାଣିବେ, ମଧୁବାବୁଙ୍କୁ ଆପଣ ଜାଣିଛନ୍ତି ମିଷ୍ଟର ଦାସ କହିଲେ ସେତେବେଳେ କେବଳ ମଧୁସୂଦନ ଦାସକୁ ବୁଝାଉଥିଲେ। ବହୁତ ଦାସ ଥିଲେ ଓଡିଶାରେ, କିନ୍ତୁ ମିଷ୍ଟର ଦାସ ମାନେ ଇଟ ଇଜ ମଧୁସୂଦନ ଦାସ। ଯେମିତି ବାଣୀ ବିହାରରେ ଡକ୍ଟର ଦାସ ମାନେ ଶ୍ରୀରାମଚନ୍ଦ୍ର ଦାସ, ବହୁତ ଦାସ ଏଠି ଯାଇଛନ୍ତି। ସେମିତି ମିଷ୍ଟର ଦାସ କହିଲେ ମଧୁବାବୁଙ୍କୁ ବୁଝାଉଥିଲା। ଜଣେ ବ୍ରିଟିଶର କହିଲା ମଧୁବାବୁଙ୍କୁ, ମିଷ୍ଟର ଦାସ ୟୁ ମଷ୍ଟ ହାଭ ହର୍ଡ that sun never sets in British Empire। ଆପଣ ଶୁଣିଥିବେ ବ୍ରିଟିଶ ଏମ୍ପାୟାରରେ ସୂର୍ଯ୍ୟାସ୍ତ ହୁଏ ନାହିଁ। ଆକ୍ଚୁଆଲି ବ୍ରିଟିଶ ମାନେ ସବୁଆଡେ ଥିଲେ, ଯୋଉଠି ସୂର୍ଯ୍ୟ ଉଦୟ ହଉଛନ୍ତି ସେଠି ବି ବ୍ରିଟିଶ, ଯୋଉଠି ଅସ୍ତ ହଉଛନ୍ତି ସେଠି ବି ବ୍ରିଟିଶ। ସେଥିପାଇଁ ତାଙ୍କର ଥିଲା ଯେ ସନ୍ ନେଭର ସେଟ୍ସ ଇନ୍ ବ୍ରିଟିଶ ଏମ୍ପାୟାର। ମଧୁବାବୁଙ୍କର ଆନ୍ସର ଶୁଣିଲେ ଆପଣ ଆଶ୍ଚର୍ଯ୍ୟ ହେବେ। ସେ କହିଲେ ସନ୍ ନେଭର ଟ୍ରଷ୍ଟସ୍ ୟୁ ନେସନ ଅଫ ଦ ଶପକିପର୍ସ। କହିଲେ ସୂର୍ଯ୍ୟ ଆପଣଙ୍କୁ ବିଶ୍ୱାସ କରୁନି ବୋଲି ଛାଡିକିରି ଯାଉନାହିଁ, ଆପଣ କେତେବେଳେ ଦେଶକୁ ବିକିଦେବେ, ସେ ଅନ୍ଧାର ହେଇଗଲା। and that was ଉତ୍କଳ ଗୌରବ ମଧୁସୂଦନ ଦାସ। ଛୋଟ ଛୋଟ ଭୁଲ ପାଇଁ ସେତେବେଳେ ଗ୍ଲୋବାଲ ବିଶ୍ୱ ମାର୍କେଟରେ ଜୋତା ବିକିବେ ବୋଲି ଉତ୍କଳ ଟ୍ୟାନେରୀ କଲେ, କିନ୍ତୁ ଗୋଟିଏ ଜୋତାର ଛୋଟ ଭୁଲ ପାଇଁ ପୁରା ଲଟ୍ଟାକୁ ପୋଡ଼ିଦେଲେ। ଯେ ମୋର ଲସ୍ ପଛେ ହଉ, ମୁଁ ବ୍ୟାଙ୍କରପ୍ଟ ହେଇଯାଏ, କିନ୍ତୁ କେହି ଜଣେ ବାହାରେ ନ କୁହନ୍ତୁ ଯେ ଓଡିଆ ଜାତି ଠକ, ଓଡିଆ ଜାତି ବେକାର ଜିନିଷ ବିକୁଛନ୍ତି ବାହାରେ। ତେଣୁ ଏଭଳି ଆଉ ଜଣେ ଲାଷ୍ଟରେ କହିବି ମହାରାଜା ଶ୍ରୀରାମଚନ୍ଦ୍ର ଭଞ୍ଜଦେଓ ପ୍ରଥମ ଗ୍ଲୋବାଲ ଚିନ୍ତାଧାରା ଆଣିଲେ ଭାରତ ବର୍ଷରେ। ପ୍ରଥମ ମହାରାଜା ଟୁ ହାଭ୍ ହିଜ୍ ଓନ୍ ଷ୍ଟେଟ୍ ବ୍ୟାଙ୍କ ଅଫ ମୟୂରଭଞ୍ଜ। ପ୍ରଥମ ମହାରାଜା ଟୁ ହାଭ୍ ହିଜ୍ ଓନ୍ ଏୟାରଲାଇନ୍ସ, ମୟୂରଭଞ୍ଜ ଷ୍ଟେଟ୍ ଏୟାରଲାଇନ୍ସ। ଦୁଇଟା ବିମାନ କିଣିକିରି, ବିଶ୍ୱଯୁଦ୍ଧରେ ୟୁଜ୍ ହେଉଥିବା ବିମାନ କିଣିକିରି ମୟୂରଭଞ୍ଜ ଷ୍ଟେଟ୍ ଏୟାରଲାଇନ୍ସ ଆରମ୍ଭ କଲେ। ରଙ୍ଗାମାଟିଆ ରାଜଗୋବିନ୍ଦପୁର ପାଖରେ ଏୟାରପୋର୍ଟ କଲେ। ଯେତେବେଳେ କଟକ ଭୁବନେଶ୍ୱର ଲୋକ ଟ୍ରେନ ଦେଖିନଥିଲେ, ମହାରାଜା ଶ୍ରୀରାମଚନ୍ଦ୍ର ଭଞ୍ଜ ବଲ୍ଟିମୋର ଆଉ ମାଞ୍ଚେଷ୍ଟରରୁ ରେଳ ଇଞ୍ଜିନ ଇମ୍ପୋର୍ଟ କରିକିରି ରୂପସାରୁ ବାଙ୍ଗିରିପୋଷି ନାରଗଜ ଟ୍ରେନ ଚଲେଇଲେ। ଯେତେବେଳେ କଟକ ଭୁବନେଶ୍ୱର ଲୋକ ଡିବିରି କିରୋସିନ ବତୀ ଜଳା ହଉଥିଲା ମ୍ୟୁନିସିପାଲିଟିରେ, ଆମେ ପିଲାବେଳେ ଦେଖିଛୁ, ସେତେବେଳେ ଇଂଲଣ୍ଡରୁ ଲିଭରପୁଲରୁ ଜେନେରେଟର ଇମ୍ପୋର୍ଟ କରିକିରି ତାର ଟଣା ହେଇକି ମୟୂରଭଞ୍ଜ ବାରିପଦାବାସୀଙ୍କୁ ପ୍ରଥମ ଇଲେକ୍ଟ୍ରିସିଟି ଦେଲେ ମହାରାଜା ଶ୍ରୀରାମଚନ୍ଦ୍ର ଭଞ୍ଜ। ଆଉ ଆପଣ ଶୁଣି ଆଶ୍ଚର୍ଯ୍ୟ ହେବେ, ସାର୍ ବାସୁଦେବ ସୁଢଳ ଦେବ ବାମଣ୍ଡାର ମହାରାଜା ଟର୍ବାଇନ ଇମ୍ପୋର୍ଟ କରିକିରି ବିଦେଶରୁ ପ୍ରଧାନପାଟ ଜଳପ୍ରପାତ ଉପରେ ଦେବଗଡ଼ ଜିଲ୍ଲାର ପାହାଡ ଉପରେ ଟର୍ବାଇନ ବସେଇକିରି ଏସିଆର ପ୍ରଥମ ଜଳ ବିଦ୍ୟୁତ କେନ୍ଦ୍ର ଆରମ୍ଭ କରିଥିଲେ ଓଡ଼ିଶାରେ। ତେଣୁ ଏଭଳିଆ ଉଲ୍ଲେଖନୀୟ ମହାରାଜା ମାନେ ଭାରତର ବିକାଶରେ, ରାଜ୍ୟର ବିକାଶରେ ବିଶ୍ୱ ଚିନ୍ତାଧାରା ଦେଇଥିଲେ। ଶ୍ରୀରାମଚନ୍ଦ୍ର ଭଞ୍ଜଦେଓ ଦେଖନ୍ତୁ, ସେ ଚାହିଁଥିଲେ ବାରିପଦାରେ ମେଡିକାଲ କଲେଜ କରିପାରିଥାନ୍ତେ, କିନ୍ତୁ କଟକରେ କଲେ। ଏଥିପାଇଁ ଯେ ସାରା ଓଡ଼ିଶାର ଲୋକ ଉପକୃତ ହେବେ, ଯୋଉଟା ସେଣ୍ଟ୍ରାଲ କନେକ୍ଟିଭିଟି ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରୁ ଇମ୍ପୋର୍ଟାଣ୍ଟ ଥିଲା, ସେ ସେଇଠି ମେଡିକାଲ କଲେଜ କଲେ। ତାଙ୍କର ସଂକୀର୍ଣ୍ଣ ଚିନ୍ତାଧାରା ନଥିଲା। ମୁଁ ଶେଷରେ ଗୋଟେ ଧାଡି କହି କ୍ଲୋଜ କରିବି, ତାପରେ ବରେଣ୍ୟ ବକ୍ତା ମାନଙ୍କୁ ଅନୁରୋଧ କରିବି କହିବା ପାଇଁ। ସେଟା ହଉଛି ଶ୍ରୀରାମଚନ୍ଦ୍ର ଭଞ୍ଜ ଯୋଉ ଭାଷଣଟା ଦେଲେ ଉତ୍କଳ ସମ୍ମିଳନୀର ଆରମ୍ଭରେ। ସେ କହିଲେ ଯେ ଯୋଉ ଜାତି ତାର ମା ଭୂପତିତ ହେଲା ବେଳେ ତାର ହୃଦୟ ବ୍ୟଥିତ ହଉନାହିଁ, ତାର ମାତୃଭାଷା ଆଜି ତଳେ ପଡିଲା ବେଳେ ଯୋଉ ଜାତି କାନ୍ଦୁ ନାହିଁ, ସେ ଜାତିର ଭବିଷ୍ୟତ ଅନ୍ଧକାର ହୁଏ। ତେଣୁ ମୁଁ ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କୁ ଅନୁରୋଧ କରୁଛି, ସମସ୍ତେ ନିଜର ମାତୃଭାଷା ଆଉ ମାକୁ ଉଠେଇବାକୁ ଚେଷ୍ଟା କରନ୍ତୁ। ଆଉ ଶ୍ରୀରାମଚନ୍ଦ୍ର ଭଞ୍ଜଙ୍କ ଭାଷଣରେ ମଧୁବାବୁ ଏତେ ଅନୁପ୍ରେରିତ ହେଲେ, ଆପଣ ଶୁଣି ଆଶ୍ଚର୍ଯ୍ୟ ହେବେ। ଓଡ଼ିଶାର 2 ଜଣ ବରପୁତ୍ର ଶ୍ରୀରାମଚନ୍ଦ୍ର ଭଞ୍ଜଦେଓଙ୍କ ପାଖରେ କାମ କରୁଥିଲେ। You will be glad to know ଉତ୍କଳମଣି ଗୋପବନ୍ଧୁ ଦାସ was an accountant in Baripada municipality appointed by His Highness the Maharaja of Mayurbhanj, and Utkal Gaurav Madhusudan Das was official lawyer to the King of Mayurbhanj. both of them were employed in the payroll of Maharaja of Mayurbhanj. उत्कल सम्मेलन को फंडिंग करिवारे ए विश्वविद्यालय को प्रतिष्ठा करिवारे जो महाराजा मानकर अवदान स्मरणीय महाराजा कृष्णचंद्र गजपति जहाँ ना आज ऑडिटोरियम होइछि आ महाराजा श्रीरामचंद्र भंज मु शेष करिया पूर्व श्रीरामचंद्र भंजंकर गोटे लाइन जोटा आर्काइव्स रे पढ़ी सेटा कहिकरी क्लोज करबी उदारवादी महाराजा थिले आपण देखंतु से समय रे समग्र विश्व को उदारता शिखैतिले श्रीरामचंद्र भंजदेव युवराज थिला बेले विदेश जाइतिले तेणु तांको बापा सेतबेले तांको से गुमास्ता फुमास्ता काको पठैतिले तांकर हिसाब रखिया पे ए जो गोल्ड कॉइन सब राजा खुशी रे दियंती कोटी के गोटे नमस्कार कला ता गोटे गोल्ड कॉइन कि गोटे नृत्य देखेला ता गोटे गोल्ड कॉइन तार हिसाब रखिया पे गोटे गुमास्ता जाइतिला से आसिला बेलको जहाज पानी जहाज रे जाउतिले से डेक ऊपर गुमास्ता मन दुख रे बसछन श्रीरामचंद्र भंजदेव कहले तुम तो विदेश विदेश बुली करी आसिलो आ मन दुख रे बसछ कहे ना मोर आपन बापा मते विश्वास रे पठैतिले जेहेतु बापा तो आपन से बहुत कम एज रे श्रीरामचंद्र भंजंकर पितृ वियोग घटितिला से कहले मु सेबेटू काम करछि आपन पाखरे 40 टा गोल्ड कॉइन रो हिसाब मिलुनी मु जदी कहबी महाराजा मते के अविश्वास करबेनी मु जानि छी किंतु मोर एते दिन रो विश्वास टा भांगी जीवो जदी आपन को मन रे गोटे संदेह पसिबो मु किछि पैसा बाटरे हड़प कर देली श्रीरामचंद्र भंजदेव कहले जो खाताटा लिखिछ टिके से कागजटा देखाओ से खाताटा आनिले सब सुंदर अक्षर रे लिखाइछि एटी महाराजा 10 टा कॉइन देले सेठी 2 टा कॉइन देले एटी 5 टा कॉइन देले कहले महाराजा अपन जे तरवर रे कोटी बेसी देई दैछन मु बोधे हिसाब रखि पारनी से कहले जोडी सब मिसई छ लास्ट को राउंड अप करछ सेटा देखा से राउंड अप करबा जगह रे महाराजा कहले मु डिक्टेशन दोछि लेखन ए पैकेट कंटेनिंग 40 गोल्ड कॉइन्स was thrown into Mediterranean by his highness the Maharaja of Mayurbhanj 40 टा गोल्ड कॉइन रो पैकेट को मयूरभंज रो महामहिम महाराजा समुद्र भूमध्य सागर रे पकई देले and that is still in the record you can check in the archives of Maharaja Sri Ramchandra Bhanj so this state has a great glorious history আজি जो टॉपिक वसुधैव कुटुंबकम और G20 আজি भली गोटे गुरुत्वपूर्ण दिन रे करिवार गोटे साधु उद्यम अछि मो इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ मीडिया स्टडीज एवं उत्कल विश्वविद्यालय को एथिपाई धन्यवाद जणिबी मधुबाबूंकर जन्मदिन रे स्वाभिमान दिवस रूपे ये जाति जेतेबेले पालन करूची आईनजीवी दिवस रूपे पालन करा जाउची शिल्प विप्लव रो दिवस रूपे आज रो दिन को पालन करा होची आज भली गोटे दिन रे G20 रो ए जो आलोचना चक्र आयोजन करा जाईची एथिरे निश्चित भाव रे एटा गोटे प्रणिधान योग्य विषय तेणु प्रोफेसर उपेंद्र पाणीकर भी इंट्रोडक्शन रो आवश्यकता नै एटा दृष्टता हो सी इज होस्ट ऑफ द फंक्शन मु वर्तमान आज रो अध्यक्ष महोदय वरिष्ठ प्रोफेसर विशिष्ट शिक्षाविद चिंता नायक मनस्तत्वविद प्रोफेसर अजित महांती को अनुरोध करी से तांकर प्रारंभिक भाषण दे
Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the whole world is but one family. Is it? That's the question that we perhaps would be dealing with today. Coming from a diverse world of Odisha, for example, if you get into an international flight and look at the passengers from all over the world carrying their own habits, own customs, own cultures, own races, own food habits, and so on. You perhaps deeply think, yes, it's a global village. But then, if you peep through the first class and the business class cabins from the economy class, where people are struggling and some are paying extra money for just 2 inches of extra leg room, you realize the contradiction in calling anything a global family or global village or whatever. There is a contradiction because on the other side, you have people lying flat, sleeping on a full bed comfortably, and enjoying availability of free drinks, wine and hard drinks, and occasionally also getting free urine, as you may have heard from the or noted from the recent news about a lot of first class passengers urinating on their co-passengers. So the contradiction is extremely obvious. That despite what we call to be a global village, we really perhaps not achieved that kind of a status, except that perhaps it's a global village with a huge zamindari system where some are more equal than the others. You look at United Nations with some countries having veto power. You look at the world, you look at how we are functioning, we look at the basics of globalization, you realize the contradiction, the inherent contradiction in calling this a global village. Therefore, I think what we would expect today is recognition, not just on the eulogistic statement of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, but we should actually be looking at the underpinnings, the assumptions of underlying the global village, concept of global village or one family, and take a nuanced view of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Thank you very much.
I thank Professor Ajit Mahdi sir for his introductory remarks, and definitely will be much benefited by his closing remarks as the chairman of this session. So now I take this opportunity of inviting Professor Suryanarayan Mishra, eminent political scientist, one of the most eloquent speakers of the state and brilliant teacher in Utkal University, in the history of Utkal University, to address the gathering.
କାଲା ଆଗରେ ମୂଳା ଚୋବେଇବା ଯାହା ଗିରିଶକି ଡାକିକି ତାଠୁ ଶୁଣିବା ସେଇଆ। ନିଜ କ୍ୟାମ୍ପସରେ ନିଜର ସ୍ତୁତି ଗାନ କରିବା ଜଣାପଡ଼ିବ ଯେମିତି ଜଣକୁ କିଏ ଶିଖେଇଛି ମୋ ବିଷୟରେ ଏହା କହ। I don't belong to that category of people. So let me begin with a story with which I had confronted with, and I had a dilemma also in the context of the topic which is assigned to me, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Well, we are 4 on the dais. Sir had passed matriculation in 1962. I am in 1966. And both the extremes in 1982. So this is the equation, because he passed sociology in 1988 and this fellow passed from my department in 1988. First time I saw him when he joined the Utkal University team to Aligarh Muslim University for the function All India Youth Festival, 12th of January 1985. Am I right? So that was the occasion when I could see and I could locate in him a good speaker. And that continues till today. But the point I was referring to, that I was a student of Puri Jilla School, of which the illustrious chairperson of this panel 3 was also. So in that school, when I was studying, on Friday, the ब्रेक आवर इज 1 आवर घंटे छुट्टी होता कहीं आम जड़े मौलवी सार थे से स्कूल रे किसी मुस्लिम पिला पढ़ुते नमाज पढ़ापी घंटाटे छुट्टी दिहला से घंटाटे आम शुक्रवार दिन बहीपत्र प्राय आणुनी मु नवम श्रेणी पढ़ुए 65 मसीहा कथा 65 माने 64 मसीहा स्टूडेंट स्ट्राइक परवर्ती जो जानुरी मास परवर्ती समय गोटे शुक्रवार रे 3-4 सांग कहले जीवा चाल बुलिया भी घंटे कौन करवा आम चक्रतीर्थ रोड आड़िकी पलैलु कॉलेज स्कूल बाहर पाख तो से पलैलु मु कहली कहीं आम आसीचे ना बहुत हिप्पी आसा हिप्पी कौन से हिप्पी कौन जान नी ना तू आसुनु मुझे चलीगली कर देखला बेलू गोटे रेस्टोरेंट पाखे चाल घर किसी नड़िया जो चांच या बंधाई लिखाई सांत्वना रेस्टोरेंट सांत्वना सांत्वना मुझे बुझीपारि से माने मते कहले 25 पैसा गोटे अंडा आमलेट ये खाइबा अंडा आमलेट कहीं खाइबा 25 पैसा ना देख से कमी करुचु तैयारी ताकू पचारे कौन कहून कौन कहूल काली ना कौन कह ना सब बस सब जो बस से अर्धमूर्त अर्धजीवित जना पड़ना 20-25 हिप्पी किए उल्लग्न अर्ध उल्लग्न को अवस्था से अच्छे मुझे वर्णना करें किंतु से मत डाकिकी नहीं कहवाई जे तू कह आम जो गुड़ा क्या कहते विश्वास कर क्लास मॉनिटर थाए मैं विरक्त कहीं फालतू कथा कह ना शुण ना कौन बाबू बाजार कौन कह कल हाउ कह इंडिया ऑल आर नांडिया माने इंग्रजी से कह आरंभ कला इंडिया ऑल आर नांडिया वुमेन किंग अंडर बांबू हाउस पोर मैन डेड से चतुर्थ श्रेणी मत पढ़ी इंग्राजी में कही पारुची हिप्पी संगे मिसिक अर्थ कौन ना भारत वर्ष एक देश जी समस्ते गरीब एवं एठी इंदिरा गांधी प्रधानमंत्री वुमेन किंग एवं ये जो बाउंश चारिया तले पुअर मैन डेड एतिक से कह ये मत खोबा मत बुले मानी ये 5 जन टंका 4 पैसा मोर खर्च है 5टी अंडा आमलेट 4 लेखे खाइलु खाई हसी खुशी होकर आसिलु देखा घंटे पार हो गए घंटे बोला आम तो घंटा नहीं कि नहीं बाड़ डेईक आसिलु बाड़ डेला समझे डेगले मुझे अथरपा असरपा नुहे अथरपा मुझे डेला बेलू पड़गली से पंक देहरे पड़गली बाड़ पछपटे जो पंक था पंक सर गोड़ा धोईक आस हाबुड़े पड़गलु आदिबंध महाकट धरले मत कौन जा तो गोड़ क्या उदा तो चक्कु तले देखे देखी पंक केम लगे क्या बाड़ी पशिल क्या बाड़ी बसिल सर जामती से चक्रतीर्थ आड़े जा मत नीलदावनी रखिले 3टा 4:30 स्कूल छुटेला पर्यटन कि मुझे जे भारत एपरी एक जगह पूरी ता भीतर एक सर्वश्रेष्ठ जगह जो शांति पाइबा विदेश हिप्पी मैंने आसिक बस तेणु मु भाविली मो से वसुधैव कुटुंबकम माने पूरी को कहीं आसिले आ गोवार तो रही पारे एटी कहीं गोवा रिलीजियस टूरिज्म कनसेप्ट ना कि कहीं आसिले मुझे भाविली मुझे देखा जाकि नीलदावनी घंटाटे 1.5 घंटा नीलदावनी रही पुणी से कौटी मेन गेट रू बाहर जो मैं स्कूल बिल्डिंग पशिच से प्रति 10 मिनट आदि घंटा को आसुना पहुंची वीर सुरेन्द्र नगर अच्छी मधु पट्टनायक सार देखी दिने कहले लगा से आंठू दरज मोर तुम कहीं छोट हो मुझे आंठी थे आदि घंटा को आज मतलब से दरज अच्छी मोर वसुधैव कुटुंबकम जो कनसेप्ट को आम बर्तमान तार व्यवसायीकरण करूनु कि मार्केटिंग करुचु कारण मो व्यवसायीकरण और मार्केटिंग दे आर ଏ ବଜାର ଅର୍ଥନୀତି ଯୁଗରେ ଅଲଗା. So when I look into this particular issue, as a student of history, many people will agree or disagree with me. But I have a high regard for the subject history, which the last lines were the stories which Sanjay was telling in the previous panel. Well, this is the country where much earlier to Belpower Declaration of 1944, the concept of welfare state was scripted by Kautilya. So imagine 1944 and 5th century, 4th century BC. See the gap. And we boast welfare state today because of the Belpower Declaration. And within the 15 Adhikaranaj of Arthashastra, in the 13th, Kautilya had written, in the happiness of the people, the happiness of the king lies, not otherwise. That is the English translation. आजिकाली कौन मुगाम्बो खुश हुआ कॉन्सेप्ट बेसी मार्केटिंग होउछ किंतु in the happiness of the people, the happiness of the king lies. So that was the Indian variant of bringing together the concept of so-called system of governance. कटक आमर स्थापना होता 999 मसीह आमे कहूँ W. Hunter, again another historian, he had written in his book केसरी डायनेस्टी बेले होता एवं 1992 कौन से सुजोग हो दुर्जोग हो गोटे फेलोशिप इंग्लैंड जाइए हिस्ट्री डिपार्टमेंट पॉलिटिकल साइंस डिपार्टमेंट मिसिक गोटे सेमिनार करते एक कथा कहली तमें मैंने आमको ओडिया कहूँ तुम मैंने आमको केमी शासन कल लंडन 800 वर्ष आ 2 मास पर पालन कर आम सहर 1000 वर्ष कर सारी तमें आमको छतराड़ा तमें आमको शासन कल बुझीपारे आमर दुर्बलता हो पारे कि तुम कौन प्रकार षड्यंत्र हो पारे न हिस्टोरियन से ताली बाली स्टूडेंट ऑफ हिस्ट्री जे ओडिशा वाज रूल्ड बाय ब्रिटिश फ्रॉम 1803 आफ्टर द बैटल ऑफ देवगां हम कहली एवं फास्ट एवेंजलिज्म आरंभ होइतला 1828 मसीहा एवं मधुबाबू जने किरस्तान हेई मध्य पुरी जगन्नाथ मंदिर रानी को रजा सत्व ऊपर फाइट करते दैट इज ओडिशा where religion doesn't intervene between the professional ethics because I am doing this work for my client, not for the temple or the no way of attaching religion to my professional knowledge. Tar origin hoji amara epics re. Here is a place where we are contesting or confronting with so many issues. Is a land which insignia is available in epic Mahabharata. Because King of Kalinga with his entourage joined the Kauravas against Pandavas in that great war of Mahabharata. जेतबेले अन्य राज्य विषय आमे केबे जानि नथिलु कि हमक से सूचना मध्ये कहि देइ एई होची जागा दिस इज द प्लेस when in 261 BC the great war of Kalinga was fought. I will not say मु थरे सप्ताहे कहूली मनमोथ पाखे स्वर्गीय मनमोथ बाबू पाखे आसी ओपी रलहन बोली जने फिल्म मेकर आसी मुवी करने आसे डिस्कसन मत मनमोथ भारी भल पाती डाकी कथबार्ता होते कथबार्ता छल कहली सर जो अशोक आसते आप कथा कहते बुझाऊँ ओडिया ना हिंदी में कह इंग्राजी सर मुझे कह आप ट्रांसलेट कर मुझे कहवाक अच्छे ना कहवाक ना कौ बाटा है अशोक आइले ये कहले मत व्हाट वाज द रूट कौन आकाश उड़ी पहुंची गले ଯଦି ଦୟା ନଦୀର ପାଣି ନାଲିଆ ହେଇଗଲା, କେତେ ଲୋକ ଥିଲେ? ମୁଁ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଭୁବନେଶ୍ୱର ଆସି ବାଣୀବିହାର 70 ମସିହାରେ ପଢିଲି, ସେତେବେଳେ ଏଠି 5,000 ଲୋକ ବି ନଥିଲେ। ସେତେବେଳେ 50ଟା ଲୋକ ଥିବେ କି ନହେଲେ 500 ଲୋକ ଥିବେ। ତାହେଲେ ଏତେ ଲୋକ ମରିଗଲେ ଯେ ଦୟା ନଦୀଟା ଏଇ ନଳା ହେଇଯାଇଛି, ସେତେବେଳେ ସମୁଦ୍ର ଥିବ, ତା ପାଣିଟା କେମିତି ନାଲିଆ ହେଇଗଲା, କେତେ ଲୋକ ମରିଥିବେ, କିଏ ମାଇଲା, କେମିତି ମରିଲେ। ଆଉ ଯୋଉ ରଜା ଯୋଉ ଅଶୋକ ଆଇଲେ, ତାଙ୍କର ବାଟରେ କେହି ନା କେହି ବାଧା ଦେଇନାହାନ୍ତି? ଏଇ ଐତିହାସିକ ମାନେ ଏକଥା କାହିଁକି ରେକର୍ଡ କରିନାହାନ୍ତି? ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ରଜା ମାନେ ତାଙ୍କୁ ବାଧା କେମିତି ନଦେଲେ, କୌଣସି ଜମିଦାର ମାନେ କେହି ବାଧା ଦେଲେ, ସେ କେମିତି ଆସିଲେ? What was the root? କହିଲେ ଭିତରଟା ଯୁକ୍ତଟା ମୋ ଆଗରେ କରନି, ରାଗିଗଲେ ମୋ ଉପରେ ମଣିଷ। ମୁଁ କହିଲି ସେଗୁଡାକ ଆପଣ ଯୋଉ ସିନେମା କରିବେ ତା ଭିତରେ ପୁରେଇବେ। ଏମିତି ଅଶୋକ ଆସୁଥିଲେ, ତା ଦେହରେ ବାଟରେ ବାଧା ଦେଲେ, ତାହେଲେ ଆମ ମନରେ ଯୋଉ ଯୋଉ ରହିଛି ଶଙ୍କା, ସେଟା ଦୂର ହେଇଯିବ। ତେଣୁ ଓଡ଼ିଶାର ଆତ୍ମା କହୁଛି କଥା ଯେ ଯୋଉ ସତ କଥା ଯେ ଏପରି ଏକ ଧର୍ମସ୍ଥଳୀ ଯୋଉଠିକି ଏଡେ ବଡ ଦୁର୍ଦ୍ଧର୍ଷ ରାଜା ଏତେ ଲୋକ ମରିବା ଶବ ଦେଖିଲା ପରେ ତାର ହୃଦୟ ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତନ ହେଇଛି ଏବଂ ଚଣ୍ଡାଶୋକରୁ ଧର୍ମାଶୋକ ହେଇଛି। ଏବଂ ସେତିକି ନୁହେଁ, ପୃଥିବୀର ପ୍ରଥମ ପବ୍ଲିକ ରିଲେସନ ଡିପାର୍ଟମେଣ୍ଟ ସୃଷ୍ଟି କରିଛି। ତାପରେ ପବ୍ଲିକ ରିଲେସନ ହିଁ କନସେପ୍ଟ ହିଁ ନଥିଲା। Because he deputed his son and daughter for preaching and propagating Buddhism after adopting Buddhism. ତେଣୁ ପବ୍ଲିକ ରିଲେସନ ଡିପାର୍ଟମେଣ୍ଟ ର ସୃଷ୍ଟି ହେଉଛି ଓଡ଼ିଶାରେ, ପୃଥିବୀର, ଏବଂ ୱେଲଫେୟାର କନସେପ୍ଟ ସୃଷ୍ଟି ହେଉଛି ଭାରତ ବର୍ଷରେ, ଯୋଉଟା କି ୱେଷ୍ଟ ଯୋଉ ବିଷୟରେ ଗତ ବର୍ଷ ମୁଁ ଗୋଟେ ଭାଷଣ ଦେବା ପାଇଁ ଓଡ଼ିଶା ସୋସାଇଟି ଅଫ୍ ଆମେରିକାରେ ସାର୍ଙ୍କଠୁ କିଛି ଟିପ୍ସ ନେଇଥିଲି। ସାର୍ ସେତେବେଳେ ଇଷ୍ଟ କୋଷ୍ଟରେ ଥିଲେ ୟୁଏସ୍ଏରେ, ମୁଁ ୱେଷ୍ଟ କୋଷ୍ଟରେ ଥିଲି। ମୁଁ ସାର୍ଙ୍କୁ ପଚାରିଲି, ସାର୍ ଗୋଟେ ବେଞ୍ଚ ମୋ ପାଖକୁ ପଠେଇଥିଲେ ଟିପ୍ସ, ବୁଲେଟେଡ୍ ପଏଣ୍ଟ, କାରଣ ଆଇ ଟେକ୍ his advice when matters are beyond my imagination or control, or I want to add more what I have learned or what I know. ତେଣୁ ସେ ଯୋଉ ଦେଇଥିଲେ ତାପରେ ଗୋଟେ ସାରାଗର୍ଭ ଭାଷଣ ସେଠି ଦେଲି, କାରଣ ଓଡ଼ିଆ ସୋସାଇଟି ଅଫ୍ ଆମେରିକାର ଆନୁଆଲ କନଭେନସନ ସାକ୍ରାମେଣ୍ଟୋ, ଯୋଉଟା କାଲିଫର୍ଣ୍ଣିଆର କ୍ୟାପିଟାଲ ସିଟିରେ ହଉଥିଲା। ତେଣୁ ମୋର କହିବା କଥା, ସେଠି ଯେତେବେଳେ ମୁଁ କହିଲି ଏ କଥା, ଯୋଉମାନେ ବୋଲେ ଆପଣ ଏଠି ଓଡ଼ିଆ ମାନେ একটা ଆସୋସିଏସନ କରିଛନ୍ତି, ଭାବିବା ଦରକାର। ଏବଂ କାଲି ଓଙ୍କାରନାଥ ମହାନ୍ତିଙ୍କୁ ମୁଁ କହୁଥିଲି ଗୋଟେ ଜାଗାରେ, ବୋଲେ ଆପଣଙ୍କ ଭଉଣୀ ଆସିଛନ୍ତି ବୋଲି କହୁଛନ୍ତି, ସେ ଭଉଣୀ ମତେ ବଞ୍ଚେଇଛନ୍ତି। ମୁଁ ଗୋଟେ କୋଲାପ୍ସ କରି ଯାଉଥିଲି, ବାହୁଡ଼ା ଦିନ ମୋର ସିଙ୍କ ହେଉଥିଲା, ସେ ଜଣେ ଡାକ୍ତରାଣୀ ବୋଲି ମୁଁ ଜାଣିନଥିଲି, ସେ ମୋତେ ଧରି ପକେଇଲେ ପଛପଟୁ, ମୋ ପାଟିରେ ତାଙ୍କର କ୍ଷୀରି ହେଇଥିଲା, ଯୋଉ ଲୋକମାନେ ଦିଆହଉଥିଲା, କିଛି କ୍ଷୀରି ପୁରେଇଦେଲେ ମୋ ପାଟିରେ, ମାନେ ମୋର ହାଇପୋଗ୍ଲାଇସେମିଆ ହେଇଯାଇଥିଲା। ମୁଁ କହିଲି ମତେ ବଞ୍ଚେଇଛନ୍ତି ନା, ଅଞ୍ଜଳିକା ତମକୁ ବଞ୍ଚେଇଦେଲା, ଭେରି ଗୁଡ୍ ଭେରି ଗୁଡ୍। ମୁଁ କହିଲି ଡାକ୍ତରାଣୀ ବୋଲି ସେ ଜାଣିପାରିଲେ ମୋର ହାଇପୋଗ୍ଲାଇସେମିଆ ହେଇଛି। ତେଣୁ ମୁଁ ସକାଳୁ ଖାଇନି, କ'ଣ କରିଛି ସେ ପଚାରିନାହାନ୍ତି, ମୋ ପାଟିରେ ମେଞ୍ଚେ କ୍ଷୀରି ପୁରେଇ ଦେଲେ, କାରଣ ସେଠି ଆଉ କ'ଣ ସେ ଦେଇଥାନ୍ତେ। ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ମହାନୁଭବତା, ଅନୁଧ୍ୟାନରୁ ଅଭିଜ୍ଞତା, ଏଇଟା ଆମ ମାଟି ଆମକୁ ଦେଇଛି। ତେଣୁ ଯେତେବେଳେ ବସୁଧୈବ କୁଟୁମ୍ବ କୁହାଯାଉଛି, ମୁଁ ତାକୁ ୱାର୍ଲଡ ସେନ୍ସରେ ନେବିନି। ବସୁଧା କହିଲେ ୱାର୍ଲଡ ନୁହେଁ, ବସୁଧା କହିଲେ ଆର୍ଥ, ଯୋଉଥିରେ ମାନବ ସଭ୍ୟତା ଅଛି ଏବଂ ତା ସାଙ୍ଗେ ସାଙ୍ଗେ ମଧ୍ୟ ବୃକ୍ଷ ଲତା ପଶୁ ପକ୍ଷୀ ଏମାନେ ସମସ୍ତେ ତା ଦେହରେ ସନ୍ନିବେଶିତ। So the earth includes along with others. ତେଣୁ ସେଇଥିପାଇଁ ଏଠି ଲେଖା ହେଇଛି one earth, one family, one future. ତେଣୁ ମୁଁ ତାକୁ ସେ ୱାର୍ଲଡ ଗୋଟେ ସଂକୀର୍ଣ୍ଣ ଚିନ୍ତାଧାରା ଭିତରକୁ ନେବାକୁ ଚାହେଁନି, ବିକଜ when we look at India, we must look beyond what others think and dream. So in that context, when this G20 say mega activities are being conducted and more to come, ତାର ମୁଁ ଆଧୁନିକ ଭିତ୍ତିଭୂମିକି ଯିବି ଯେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଆମେ ଜାଣୁନଥିଲେ କ'ଣ ହଉଛି। The empires are being built, wars are being fought for nothing, and there was an unnecessary war for 30 years which was completed, and it was a zero-sum game. There was no result but huge casualties, and it was concentrated within the European periphery. And after that 30 years of war, a Treaty of Westphalia was signed in 1648. That precisely for a student of political science begins the modern era, the era of rule of law, the concept of pinning of sovereignty, that a state has a boundary of its own. କାରଣ ଉଡ୍ରୋ ୱିଲସନ୍ 1911 ମସିହାରେ କହିଲେ ଯେ ଗୋଟେ ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ର କହିଲେ କିଛି ଲୋକ ଗୋଟେ ପରିସୀମା ଭିତରେ ଆଇନ ତିଆରି କରିବାକୁ ଯେତେବେଳେ ସମର୍ଥ ହେଉଥିବେ ତାକୁ କୁହାଯିବ ଏକ ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ର। ତେଣୁ ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ରର ଯେଉଁ ସବୁଠାରୁ ଭଲ ଯଦି ଆମେ ଦେଖିବା ଯେ ଡେଫିନିସନ କିଏ ଦେଇଛନ୍ତି ତାକୁ ଆମେ ଗ୍ରହଣ କରୁ ଯେ ଆମେରିକାର ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ରପତି ହେବା ପୂର୍ବରୁ 1911 ମସିହାରେ ସେ 12 ମସିହାରେ ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ରପତି ହେଇଥିଲେ, 11 ମସିହାରେ ଏକଥା ସେ କହିଥିଲେ। A state is a people organized for law within a given territory. That's the best ever definition given for the state, idea of state. ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ state conceptଟା କିଏ ଲ କରିବ, ଯାହାର ଲ କରିବାର ଅଧିକୃତ ସେ ହେଇଥିବ, ଯିଏ ଲ କରିବ ତାକୁ ଅନ୍ୟମାନେ ମାନିବେ। ମୁଁ ଏଇଠି କହିଦେବି ଏଇଟା ମୋର, ମତେ କ'ଣ କିଏ ଦେଇଦେବେ? ତେଣୁ ଅଧିକୃତ ହେଇଥିବି ଏବଂ ମୁଁ ଯାହା କହିବି ତାକୁ ଅନ୍ୟମାନେ ଶୁଣିବେ, ମାନିବେ ଏବଂ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟରେ ଲଗେଇବେ। ସେଇଟା ହେଉଛି ଆଇନ, ଅନ୍ୟ ଯାହା ସବୁ ବେଆଇନ। ତେଣୁ 1648 for me is a red letter year where the dividing lines were very clear. And when you look into this aspect of the march of the civilization, modern civilization, a Dutch jurist came, Hugo Grotius, ତାକୁ ଲେଖିଲା ବେଳେ ଲେଖାଯାଏ ହ୍ୟୁଗୋ ଗ୍ରୋଟିୟସ୍, ଯାହାକୁ ଆମେ କହୁଛୁ ଫାଦର ଅଫ୍ ଇଣ୍ଟରନ୍ୟାସନାଲ ଲ। ସେ ଲେଖିଲେ ଗୋଟେ ବହି ଦ ଜୁରେ ବେଲିଆକ୍ ପାସିସ୍, ଦି ଲଜ୍ ଅଫ୍ ୱାର୍ ଆଣ୍ଡ ପିସ୍, ଯୋଉଥିରେ ପ୍ରଥମ ଥର ପାଇଁ ଲିପିବଦ୍ଧ ହେଲା ମାନେ ୱେଷ୍ଟର୍ଣ୍ଣ ସିଭିଲାଇଜେସନରେ ଗୋଟେ ଜଷ୍ଟ ୱାର୍ କୋଉଟା, ଅନଜଷ୍ଟ ୱାର୍ କୋଉଟା, ୱାର୍ ବେଳେ କ'ଣ କରିବ, ୱାର୍ ବେଳେ କ'ଣ ପାଳନ କରିବ ଏବଂ ସିଭିଲିଆନ୍ ପପୁଲେସନ୍ ପ୍ରତି ବ୍ୟବହାର କେମିତି ରହିବ, ଏଇଟା 1648 ପରର କଥା। କିନ୍ତୁ ଆମେ ଜାଣିଛୁ, ୱି ନୋ, ମହାଭାରତ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ଆରମ୍ଭ ହେବା ବେଳେ ଭୀଷ୍ମ ଡାକିକିରି ଦୁଇଟାଙ୍କର ସେନାପତି ମାନଙ୍କୁ ବସେଇକିରି ଯୁଦ୍ଧରେ କ'ଣ କ'ଣ ନୀତି ଅବଲମ୍ବନ କରାଯିବ, କିଏ କାହା ସହିତ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ କରିବ, ଯିଏ ହାତୀରେ ବସି ସେ ହାତୀବାଲା ସହିତ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ କରିବ, ଯିଏ ଘୋଡ଼ାରେ ଅଛି ସେ ଘୋଡ଼ାବାଲା ସହିତ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ କରିବ ଏବଂ ଯାହା ହାତରେ ଅସ୍ତ୍ର ନାହିଁ ସେ ଅସ୍ତ୍ରବାଲା ତା ସାଙ୍ଗେ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ କରିବ ନାହିଁ ଏବଂ ଅସ୍ତ୍ର ଆରମ୍ଭ ହେବ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ଯେତେବେଳେ ବିଗୁଲ ବାଜିବ, ପୁଣି ସେଇ ବିଗୁଲ ବାଜିବାରେ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ବନ୍ଦ ହେବ, ଅସ୍ତ୍ର ପ୍ରୟୋଗ ବନ୍ଦ ହେବ ଏବଂ ଜଣିଏ ବୈଦ ଥିବ ସେ ବୁଲି ବୁଲିକିରି ଯେତେବେଳେ ତାଙ୍କ ଖଣ୍ଡିଆ ଖାବରା ହେଇଛନ୍ତି ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ସେବା କରିବ। ଏଇଟା ମହାଭାରତ ସମୟରେ the rules of the game were specified in India, whereas after 1648 we could know that the modern age or modern state system could know about the rules of the game in a war. ଯାହାକୁ war କୁହାଯାଏ, ଯୋଉଗୁଡ଼ାକୁ warରେ କରଣୀୟ, ଯୋଉଗୁଡ଼ାକ ଅକରଣୀୟ, ଏସବୁ ଜିନିଷ ଗୁଡ଼ାକ ଆମେ ଏତେ ଡେରିରେ ଜାଣୁଛେ। ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ଚିନ୍ତାଧାରାର ସୃଷ୍ଟି, ଏଇ ଚିନ୍ତାଧାରାର ଯେ ନାୟକ ଏବଂ ଏଇ ଚିନ୍ତାଧାରାକୁ ଭାରତ ବର୍ଷରେ ଏବଂ ସାରା ପୃଥିବୀରେ ଯୋଉଟାକୁ ପ୍ରତିଶ୍ରୁତିବଦ୍ଧତା ସହିତ ଯାହାକୁ ପ୍ରତିପାଳନ କରାଯାଇଛି ସେ ଭୂଇଁ ହେଉଛି ଭାରତ। ତେଣୁ ସେ ଭୂଇଁରେ ଯୋଉ ଭାରତ ବର୍ଷରେ ଯୋଉ ଚିନ୍ତାଧାରା ଗୁଡ଼ିକର ଉଦ୍ଗୀରଣ ହେଇଛି, ଯୋଉ ଚିନ୍ତାଧାରା ଗୁଡ଼ିକ ଏଠାରେ ବୀଜ ବପନ କରାଯାଇଛି, if we look down the memory lane, I have nothing to say about the West. I don't preach West because it's a completely a West for me. But when I look to my own country had enormous opportunities. It had a vision and wisdom unparalleled to many of the Western countries. And that too, when we look into this particular aspect, I am reminded of the UN Chronicle, ୟୁନାଇଟେଡ୍ ନେସନ୍ର କ୍ରନିକଲ ମୁଁ ଭାଷା ପାଟିରୁ କହୁନି 1648ରୁ 1945 ମସିହା ମଧ୍ୟରେ ମାନେ 297 ବର୍ଷ ମଧ୍ୟରେ 963 ଗୋଟି ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ହେଇଛି। ଇଟ୍ସ ରେକର୍ଡେଡ ଇନ୍ ଦ ୟୁଏନ୍ କ୍ରନିକଲ। ଏବଂ ତା ଭିତରୁ 961 ଗୋଟି ହେଉଛି ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ଆଉ ଯୋଡ଼ିଏ ହେଉଛି ବିଶ୍ୱଯୁଦ୍ଧ। 44.6 ମିଲିୟନ ତାମାନେ 4 କୋଟିରୁ ଅଧିକ ଲୋକ ମୃତାହତ ହେଇଛନ୍ତି, ଯୋଉଟା ଇନକ୍ଲୁଡ କରୁଛି ଅଗଷ୍ଟ 6 ଅଗଷ୍ଟ 9 1945 ମସିହାର ଲିଟଲ ବୟ ଆଉ ଫ୍ୟାଟ ମ୍ୟାନ ଯୋଉ ଯୋଡ଼ିକ ବୋମା ପଡ଼ିଥିଲା ହିରୋସୀମା ନାଗାସାକି ତାର କାଜୁଆଲିଟି ସହିତ। କିନ୍ତୁ এই ଯୋଡ଼ିକ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ୱିଥ୍ ହିରୋସୀମା ନାଗାସାକି 18.7 44.6 18.7 କେବଳ ବିଶ୍ୱଯୁଦ୍ଧ ଗୁଡ଼ିକରେ। ଆଉ 961 ଯୁଦ୍ଧରେ ଅନ୍ୟ କାଜୁଆଲିଟି ଗୁଡ଼ିକ ହେଇଛନ୍ତି, ଯୋଉଟା ଆପଣମାନେ ସିମ୍ପଲ ଏରିଥମେଟିକ 44.6ରୁ 18.7 ଫେରିଦେଲେ ଆପଣ ଜାଣିପାରିବେ ଯେ 26 ବିଲିୟନରୁ କମ୍ ଲୋକ 961 ଯୁଦ୍ଧରେ ମରିଛନ୍ତି। କିନ୍ତୁ 1945 ମସିହା ପରେ ଆଜି ପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ ଯେତେକ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ହେଇଛି କିମ୍ବା ଛାୟା ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ହେଇଛି କିମ୍ବା ଶୀତଳ ଯୁଦ୍ଧର ଯୋଉମାନେ ସବୁ ଶିକାର ହେଇଛନ୍ତି କିମ୍ବା ଛୋଟ ମୋଟ ସ୍କିର୍ମିସେସ୍ ହେଇଛି, କେତେ ଯେ ମରିଛନ୍ତି କହିବାର ନାହିଁ। ଏ କାହିଁକି ମରିଛନ୍ତି? They have sacrificed their life or they have been killed or they have fell victim to the machination of others. Nobody is there to answer in this modern world. Everybody is talking about protecting their own country, but a country should not become adversarial for another country. Nobody is talking. Now we are living in a world of difference. 1945 ରେ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ସରିଲା. The second world was over. But on 14th of August 1941, an Atlantic Charter was signed. And that Atlantic Charter, 4 signatories were there, and it was in a port town of Argentina. And 4 signatories were Franklin D. Roosevelt, American president, wartime Prime Minister of England, Winston Churchill, Joseph Stalin, the Soviet communist head, and Chiang Kai-shek, तत्कालीन चाइना जे मुख्य। ये 4 जनक सिग्नेचर रे they assured the globe, assured the world with the Wilsonian wisdom. Wilson जेतेबेले जॉइन करथिले युद्ध रे काहे की जॉइन करथिले? से जॉइन करथिला मोरल ग्राउंड। कारण 1823 मसिया रो अमेरिका वाज अंडर Monroe Doctrine. America for Americans, you Europeans keep up. तमे तम कथा रे व्यस्त रहो, हमें आम कथा रे व्यस्त रहउछु। Monroe Doctrine रो माने अवधारणा करबा एति दरकार नै, किंतु ताको भंग करिकरी लुसिटानिया जहाज रे 1500 महिला छुआ को नेकरी क्रिसमस मनेया को जाउतला बेले आइसलैंड रो शोर रे जर्मन टॉर्पेडो तले बुड़ेई देला लुसिटानिया, से 1500 पिला एवं महिला मरजिबा परे याकर हृदय कांदिला उड्रो विल्सनकर। मु सेतोल ताको ऊपर प्रेशर पडुथला बिजनेसमैन कर, ताकर इन्वेस्टमेंट इन यूरोप वाज अंडर थ्रेट। तेणु सी डिक्लेयर कले युद्ध 17 मसिया 12 मसिया 14 मसिया युद्ध आरंभ हेलानी, 12 मसिया से प्रेसिडेंट, किंतु मोनरो डॉक्ट्रिन वाज द बैरियर। तो सेही पई विल्सन युद्ध रे जॉइन कला परे the balance of the war tilted in favor of the allies, and ultimately the war could come to an end under the signature and also guideline of Wilsonian 14 points. जो 14 point रो 14 point होची लीग ऑफ नेशंस के किंतु ए जो गुडा से कले ताको अमेरिकार स्वीकृति नथिला, कारण अमेरिकार सिस्टम धरा बंधा चेक्स एंड बैलेंस रे प्रेसिडेंट जहा करबे इट मस्ट बी अप्रूव्ड बाय द सीनेट, एंड जदि किछि पॉलिसी हला ताको देखिया पे निरीक्षण करिया पे जुडिशियरी अछि। तो चेक्स एंड बैलेंस इज द अमेरिकन सिस्टम ऑफ सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर। तो जेहेतु सुप्रीम प्रेसिडेंट कर निष्पत्ति को ग्रहण करिनी एवं अप्रूवल देइनी सीनेट अंडर सीनेटोरियल कर्सी, ऑल दिस modern activities of Woodrow Wilson were rejected by America. That is why America was not a member of League of Nations. And League of Nations survived for 20 years without America and died in the absence of America. He died in the absence of America, so we could not write a bit or scripted a bitter story out of a bitter experience. E.H. Carr, in his book 20 Years of Crisis, lectured the soldiers won the war, but the statesmen lost the peace. The soldiers won the war, statesmen lost the peace. Where? Now in the Treaty of Versailles. Germany ki ete jone mado kale, France କହିଲା ମୁଁ ସବୁ ଦେଇଦେ, ଜର୍ମାନୀ କହିଲେ ତୁ ଖାଣ୍ଡାଳ ତୋ ହାତରେ କିଛି ଅଂଶ ଏଗୁଡ଼ାକ କିଛି ତୋତେ ମାନିବାକୁ ପଡ଼ିବ। ଜର୍ମାନୀ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଏତେ ଅତ୍ୟାଚାରିତ ହେଲା, ଏତେ ଅପମାନିତ ହେଲା, ଏବଂ that created a Hitler in Germany and later Mussolini in Italy, and combined strength of them with the addition of Hirohito of Japan, we could see Rome, Berlin, Tokyo axis leading to the Second World War. ତେଣୁ 1941 ମସିହାରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ସେୟା ହେଇଥିଲା। ପର୍ଲ ହାର୍ବର ଇନସିଡେଣ୍ଟ ପରେ ଆମେରିକା ଜୟଥିଲା। ଆମେରିକା ପ୍ରଥମ ଯୁଦ୍ଧରେ ନଥିଲା, କିନ୍ତୁ ପର୍ଲ ହାର୍ବରରେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ହେଲା ବମ୍ବିଂ ଜାପାନ ତରଫରୁ, ସେତେବେଳେ ଆମେରିକା ଆସିଲା ଯୁଦ୍ଧକୁ। ଏବଂ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ଆରମ୍ଭ ହେବା ବେଳେ କେମିତି ଶାନ୍ତିର ବାଟ, ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ସହିତ ଶାନ୍ତି ସମାନ୍ତରାଳ ଭାବରେ ଚାଲିଛି, ସେଠି ଆଟଲାଣ୍ଟିକ ଚାର୍ଟରରେ ଚାରିଟା ସେ ଦେଇଥିଲେ assurance to the world within the Wilsonian wisdom of protecting democracy. Se kahitile in future will give you freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from fear, freedom from want. These four ultimately became the 30 Articles Universal Declaration of Human Rights. ଆଜି ଯେତେବେଳେ ଆମେ ଆଲୋଚନା କରୁଛେ ଏବଂ ଭାରତ ମଧ୍ୟ ନେତୃତ୍ୱ ନେଉଛି, ଯେ କୁଆଡ଼େ ଗଲା ତମର ସେଇ ଆଶ୍ୱାସନା? Where is that? Where is the freedom from want? ଆଜି 200 କୋଟି ଲୋକ ଖାଦ୍ୟ ଅଭାବରେ ଅଛନ୍ତି, ଖାଇବାକୁ ପାଉନାହାନ୍ତି। ଆଜି ଭୟରେ ରହିଛନ୍ତି ପ୍ରାୟ 400 କୋଟି ଲୋକ ପୃଥିବୀର। So freedom from fear and freedom from want, these were the two tall promises made by the countries who won the war and forgot. ବାହାଘର ପରେ ବେଦି ମୁହଁ ପୋଡ଼ ବୋଲି ଯେମିତି କୁହାଯାଏ, ସେମିତିକା ଭୁଲିଗଲେ ଏମାନଙ୍କୁ, ଯାହା ଫଳରେ the world, we are living in a different world today. ଆଜି ଆମେ ଯେତେବେଳେ when we are analyzing this thing in the context of G20, of which India is giving the leadership for 1 year old, but India will continue for another year as a member of the Troika, because G20 ର ଗୋଟେ ସେକ୍ରେଟେରିଏଟ୍ ନାହିଁ, ତାର ଆଗ ପଛ କେହି ନାହାନ୍ତି, ତେଣୁ ସିଏ ଗୋଟେ ଜିଆ ଭଳିଆ, ସେ କୁଆଡ଼େ କୋଉ ପଟକୁ ଯିବ ତାର କିଛି ଠିକଣା ନାହିଁ। ତେଣୁ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଆମେ ଏ ବର୍ଷ ଯୋଉ ହଉଛି ଏଠି ଇଣ୍ଡୋନେସିଆ, ଇଣ୍ଡିଆ ଆଉ ବ୍ରାଜିଲ ଏମାନେ ହଉଛନ୍ତି ଟ୍ରଇକାର ମେମ୍ବର। ଆସନ୍ତା ବର୍ଷ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆ, ବ୍ରାଜିଲ, ଇଟାଲୀ ଏଇ ଟାଇପର ଯିବ। ତେଣୁ ଏ ବର୍ଷର ଯୋଉ 3 ଜଣିଆ ଅଛନ୍ତି, ଏଇଟା ହଉଛି G20 ଇତିହାସରେ ପ୍ରଥମ ଯେ 3ଟା ଇମର୍ଜିଂ ଆଣ୍ଡ ଇମର୍ଜଡ ଇକୋନୋମି without a western developed economy is leading the world. G20 ର ଏ ବର୍ଷର ଗୁରୁତ୍ୱ ହେଲା ଯେ 3ଟା ଡେଭଲପିଂ କଣ୍ଟ୍ରି, ଇଣ୍ଡୋନେସିଆ, ଇଣ୍ଡିଆ ଆଣ୍ଡ ବ୍ରାଜିଲ, ଯାହା ଭିତରେ ଆଉ ଏପଟ ସେପଟ କେହି ନାହାନ୍ତି। ସେଇଥିପାଇଁ ଜୟଶଙ୍କର ଯେତେବେଳେ 20 ମସିହାରେ କହିଥିଲେ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆ ଫାଷ୍ଟ, ସେ କାହିଁ କହିଥିଲେ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆ ଫାଷ୍ଟ? କାରଣ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆକୁ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ପଡ଼ିବ। ଏମିତିକା ସେକ୍ରେଟେରିଏଟ୍ ନଥିବା ସଂସ୍ଥା ମେ 22 ମସିହାରୁ ଜଣେ ପ୍ରବୀଣ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆନ ଫରେନ୍ ସର୍ଭିସ ସିଙ୍ଗଲା ତାକୁ ସେକ୍ରେଟେରିଏଟ୍ ଦାୟିତ୍ୱ ଦେଇକି ସେକ୍ରେଟାରୀ ଜେନେରାଲ କରିଛନ୍ତି। ଏବଂ ଗୋଟେ ଶବ୍ଦ ସେର୍ପା, ଯେମିତି ସେର୍ପା ତେଞ୍ଜିଂ ଚଢ଼ିକିରି ଯାଉଥିଲେ ହିମାଳୟକୁ, ସେମିତି ଭାରତ ଚାହୁଁଛି ଚଢ଼ିକିରି ପୃଥିବୀକି ଦେଖେଇବା ପାଇଁ what we can do. So we have created Amitabh Kant, Amitabh Kant, he was Niti Ayog as the Sherpa. ଏବଂ ମେ 22ରୁ ଆମର ଯୋଜନା ଚାଲିଛି ମୁଁ କେତେ ଯେ ମିଟିଂ ହେଲାଣି କେତେ ପ୍ରକାର ମାନସ ମନ୍ଥନ ହେଲାଣି ଫର୍ ହ୍ୱାଟ୍ the underground work has been done, the surface is open, and the message is clear that we do not want to be dictated upon. And what we want, that India believes in its traditional values and customs. ଯେତେବେଳେ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ସରିଗଲା ସେତେବେଳେ ପଚରାଲା ଯୁଧିଷ୍ଠିରଙ୍କୁ ମହାଭାରତ ପରେ ତମେ ଧନ ନେଇ କଣ କରିବ ଧନ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ଦବ ନା ଗରିବ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ଦବ ନା ଧନ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ଧନ ଦେଇକିରି କିଛି ଲାଭ ହବନି ସେଇ ଧନକୁ ସାଦରେ ଗ୍ରହଣ କଲେ ମଧ୍ୟ ତାର ସ୍ୱାଦ ଚାଖି ପାରିବେ ନାହିଁ ଅଲରେଡି ତାଙ୍କ ପାଖରେ ଧନ ଅଛି କିନ୍ତୁ ଗରିବକୁ ଧନ ଦେଲେ ସେମାନେ ଅନ୍ତତଃ ତାଙ୍କ ଆଖିରୁ ଲୁହ ବାହାରି ପାରେ ସେ କାନ୍ଦୁ ନଥିବେ ଲୁହଟା ହେଉଛି ଆନନ୍ଦର ଅଶ୍ରୁ ତେଣୁ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଭାରତ ଚାହୁଁଛି जो global south which is neglected for so many years because आमे जदि देखिबा सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर परे नॉर्थ साउथ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट पछरे आसिला ईस्ट वेस्ट कॉन्फ्लिक्ट आगो आसिला ईस्ट वेस्ट कॉन्फ्लिक्ट इज एन आइडियोलॉजिकल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट बिटवीन सोशलिज्म एंड कैपिटलिज्म and north south is between the colonies and colonizers south is colony colonizers are north so that created a world with differences. ତେଣୁ ପୃଥିବୀର କମ ସଂଖ୍ୟାର ଲୋକ ବହୁ ଆର୍ଥିକ ସମ୍ପତ୍ତି ଏବଂ ତା ସାଙ୍ଗେ ସାଙ୍ଗେ ତା ଦେହରୁ ସୃଷ୍ଟି ହୋଇଥିବା ବହୁତ ପ୍ରକାର ମାଲିକାନାର ଦାୟିତ୍ୱରେ ଅଛନ୍ତି କିନ୍ତୁ ଯେଉଁମାନଙ୍କ ପାଖରେ ଜ୍ଞାନ ଅଛି ସୁଯୋଗ ନାହିଁ ଯେଉଁମାନଙ୍କ ପାଖରେ ଲୋକ ଅଛନ୍ତି ଖାଇବାକୁ ପାଉନାହାନ୍ତି ଯେଉଁମାନେ ଚାହିଁଲେ କିଛି କରିପାରିବେ କରିପାରୁନାହାନ୍ତି ସେମାନେ ରହୁଛନ୍ତି କଲୋନି ମାନଙ୍କରେ and for this the leadership was taken by India in March 1947 when Pandit Nehru when he was only prior to independence as Minister of External Affairs and Vice Premier ବୋଲି କୁହାଯାଉଥିଲା ସେତେବେଳେ ସେ ଏସିଆନ୍ ରିଲେସନ୍ସ କନଫରେନ୍ସ କରିଥିଲେ जो एशियन रिलेशंस कॉन्फ्रेंस रा अर्थ थिला जे औपनिवेशिकवादକୁ दूर केमिति करिबा तो इंडिया हैज क्रिएटेड विद इन द ग्लोबल साउथ a history of its own india enjoys a natural leadership among the global south whatever may be the intriguing machinations of people's republic of china by advancing loan donating monies and helping them during the period of their crisis and in the aftermath what has happened to Sri Lanka everybody knows they will be doing but India has come as a rescuer India knows how to protect so India believes in its traditional value of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam in the sense that the mother earth is to be protected karan ame जो मैंने आसुचे आर्टिस्ट आसुचे स्टेज को से इधर छुई गिरी मुंडे ने मारते हैं ताई अरे उद्देश्य कौन in the western country you will not find such type of behavior but आमे सब बड़े माँ को रज देते बड़े पालन करा जाए आउ दिमास पर पालन करा जीवो सेते बड़े जो ओडिशा रे जो प्रकार रज पर्व रो जो गुरुत्व जो महत्व जो प्रकार तार मेसेज से मेसेज गुड़ा जो आम देखुचे से मेसेज को जो आप शेयरिंग करेंगे विथ अदर काउंटर पार्ट्स इन अदर एरियाज दैट इंडिया इज रियली ए कल्चर बेस्ड डेमोक्रेसी इट हैज क्रिएटेड ए डेमोक्रेटिक कल्चर ऑफ ए डिफरेंट टोन बट इन इंडिया टुडे व्हाट हैपेंस इंस्टेड ऑफ हैविंग पॉलिटिक्स ऑफ कल्चर वी आर हैविंग कल्चर ऑफ पॉलिटिक्स And that culture of politics might have created a domestic aberration, might have created a bad name for us, or might have given a temporary media frontline footage, maybe. But the basics of India's civilizational journey cannot be tarnished. And it has to be maintained at any cost. That probably the Team India, the Team 20, the Think Tank 20, they are looking into to protect India's hard-earned reputation Today we are number one most populous country. We are the third economy in PPP front. We are most emerging industrialized country. And India has created a name for itself during the hours of crisis. Recent one is the pandemic. How India shares its fortune with others despite domestic trouble, despite accusations by unqualified sector about the vaccine production, vaccine sharing. କାରଣ ଏତିକି ମନେ ରଖିଥା ଯୋଉ ଗୋଟିଏ ଉହାନ ସହରରୁ କଣଟେ ବାହାରିଲା ସାରା ପୃଥିବୀକି ଥରେଇ ଦେଲା ଆମେରିକାର ଟଙ୍କା କିଛି କାମ ଦେଲାନି ଆମେରିକାର ଟଙ୍କା କିଛି କାମ ଦେଲାନି ମୁଁ ଏଠି ଯୋଡ଼େ ଫୋଡ଼ା ଖାଇକିରି ଆମେରିକା ଗଲି ମୁଁ ଯୋଡ଼େ ଫୋଡ଼ା ଖାଇବାର ମାସକ ପରେ ମତେ କୋଭିଡ ହେଇଗଲା ତାର 6 ମାସ ଯିବା ରାସ୍ତା ବନ୍ଦ ଥିଲା ରାସ୍ତା ଯୋଉଦିନ ଖୋଲିଲା ମତେ ଟିକେଟଟା କ୍ୟାନସଲ ହେଇଯିବ ବୋଲି ଗଲି ବୋଲି ସେଠି ଇମିଡିଏଟଲି ଯୋଡ଼େ ମଡର୍ନା ନେଲି ମୁଁ କୋଉଟା ମୁଁ ନେଇଛି କାହିଁ ନେବି ତାର 4 ମାସ ପରେ ମୁଁ ଗୁଡ଼େ ବୁଲାବୁଲି କରି ଯାହା ହଉ ସବୁବେଳେ ତୁଣ୍ଡି ବାନ୍ଧିକିରି ବୁଲିଲେ ମଧ୍ୟ ମତେ ସେକେଣ୍ଡ ଟାଇମ କୋଭିଡ ହେଇଗଲା ସେଠି ତେଣୁ କୋଭିଡଟା କ'ଣ ଆମେରିକାର ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କୁ ମୁଁ ଦେଖିଛି ମୁଁ ଶୁଣିଛି ଯୋଉମାନଙ୍କ ସାଙ୍ଗେ ମିଶିଛି ମାନେ ନ୍ୟୁୟର୍କରେ 4 ଦିନ ଥିଲି ମତେ ଦେଖୁଥିବା ଜଣେ ବୁଲିକିରି ଏଇ ଜାଗାରେ ଖାଲି ଡେଡ୍ ବଡି ଏମିତିକା ପାହାଡ଼ ଭଳିଆ କୁଢ଼ା ହେଇଥିଲା ଅନ୍ତତଃ ଆମ ଭାରତବର୍ଷ ତ ସେମିତି ହେଇନି ଆମର ସେମିତି ମୃତ୍ୟୁବରଣ କରିନୁ କାହିଁ କରିନୁ କାରଣ ଆମେ ଘଣ୍ଟ ବଜେଇଲୁ ମାନେ ଠାକୁରଙ୍କୁ ନିବେଦନ କଲୁ ଘଣ୍ଟ ବଜେଇବାରୁ ଆମର ଆରମ୍ଭ ହେଲା ଯେ ଆମର ସଚେତନତା ଆରମ୍ଭ ହେଲା ସେ ଯୋଉ ସଚେତନତା ସୃଷ୍ଟି କରିବା ଏ ସଚେତନତା ଆମର ଉପନିଷଦରେ ବେଦରେ ଏବଂ ଆମର କାର୍ଯ୍ୟକ୍ରମ ମାନଙ୍କରେ ଅଛି ଶୁଣ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆ is a country with a history and this history is based upon the culture and civilization culture କହିଲେ କ'ଣ civilization କହିଲେ କ'ଣ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ମରା ହେଇଛି ଶ୍ରୀରାମ ଭାଷଣ ଦେଖଉଥିଲା କିମ୍ବା ତାଙ୍କ ପୂର୍ବରୁ ପ୍ରାଣକୃଷ୍ଣ ପର୍ଯ୍ୟାୟ ଏଗୁଡ଼ା କିଛି ଥିଲା ଏଗୁଡ଼ା ସବୁ ସିଭିଲାଇଜେସନ ଇମ୍ପାକ୍ଟ କଲଚର କହିଲେ କ'ଣ ମୁଁ ଯେମିତିକା କହୁଛି ମୁଁ ଯୋଉ କଥା ହିପିଙ୍କ କଥା କହୁଥିଲି ନିଲ୍ ଡାଉନ୍ ହେଇକିରି ଘଣ୍ଟେ କାଳ ବସିଥିଲି ସେଟା ହଉଛି ଆମ କଲଚର କଲଚର ଇଜ ହ୍ୱାଟ ଆଇ am civilization is what we have so India makes a combination of both culture and civilization in its total journey in the world so G20 will give India energy to fight for global justice and sustainable development. We'll see that the food security, because when India in Doha was fighting for food security, everybody was saying that you have only one problem. You are talking about food only. I am not talking about Narendra Modi, other people also previously. So Doha agreement रे मध्य समस्त एक कथा कहते କିନ୍ତୁ ultimately କ'ଣ ହେଲା ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ସମସ୍ତେ ଫୁଡ୍ ସିକ୍ୟୁରିଟି everybody is giving food security a prime importance ଏଇ ଯୋଉ G20 ୟାର ସୃଷ୍ଟି କୋଉଠି 1971 ମସିହାରେ 6ଟା ଉନ୍ନତ ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ର ସେମାନେ ଡିସାଇଡ୍ କଲେ ଯେ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଯୋଉ ପ୍ରକାର ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତନ ହେଉଛି କାରଣ ଅଲରେଡି Soviet President Podgorny କହିସାରିଲେଣି ଯେ now nothing will happen in this world without approval of Soviet Union ତାମାନେ 75 ମସିହା ପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ ସୋଭିଏତ ୟୁନିୟନ ସୁପର ପାୱାର ନଥିଲା ଆମକୁ ବୁଝ କଥା କୁହା ହଉଥିଲା କ୍ଲାସରେ ସୁପର ପାୱାର 72 ମସିହାରେ ସେ ହେଲା କାରଣ 72 ମସିହା ପୂର୍ବରୁ ସେ କଥା କହୁଛି ତା ପୂର୍ବରୁ ବ୍ରେଜନେଭ ଡକ୍ଟ୍ରିନ୍ ଅଫ 1967 ଯେତେବେଳେ ପ୍ରାଗ ସ୍ପ୍ରିଙ୍ଗ ମାନେ ଚେକୋସ୍ଲୋଭାକିଆକୁ ଦମନ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ଆଲେକ୍ସାଣ୍ଡର ଡୁବସେକର ଯୋଉ ମୁଭମେଣ୍ଟକୁ ଦମନ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ବ୍ରେଜନେଭ ଡକ୍ଟ୍ରିନ୍ ଏ ବ୍ରେଜନେଭ ଡକ୍ଟ୍ରିନ୍ ହେଲା କ'ଣ ଦ ୱାର୍ସା କଣ୍ଟ୍ରିଜ୍ have limited power of sovereignty you do not have sovereignty you are not sovereign you are a Warsaw member you cannot claim sovereignty and that happened in 1956 Hungary crisis 66 Romania 68 ରେ ଚେକୋସ୍ଲୋଭାକିଆ ତେଣୁ ୟା ପରେ ପରେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ସୋଭିଏତ ୟୁନିୟନ ଏକଥା କହୁଛି ତେଣୁ ଆମେରିକା ଚିନ୍ତା କଲା ଯେ ଏନପିଟି ସତ୍ତ୍ୱେ ମଧ୍ୟ ନନ୍ ପ୍ରୋଲିଫରେସନ ଟ୍ରିଟି ପରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ସୋଭିଏତ ୟୁନିୟନ ଇଜ ଓପନିଂ ଇଟ୍ସ ୱିଙ୍ଗସ ସେଇଥିପାଇଁ ଏଇ 6ଟି ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ର ଏକାଠି ହେଲେ ଏବଂ 76 ମସିହାରେ କାନାଡା ୟାଙ୍କ ସହିତ ଯୋଗ ଦେଲା ତେଣୁ G7 କନସେପ୍ଟ ୱାଜ କ୍ରିଏଟେଡ୍ ଇନ୍ 1976 1989 ରେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ବେଲଗ୍ରେଡରେ 9th ନନ୍ ଆଲାଇନ୍ଡ କନଫରେନ୍ସ ହେଇଥିଲା ନନ୍ ଆଲାଇନମେଣ୍ଟ ଷ୍ଟାର୍ଟ ହେଇଥିଲା 61 ମସିହା କନଫରେନ୍ସ ହେଇଥିଲା ପ୍ରଥମ ନାସେର ନେହେରୁ ଆଣ୍ଡ ଟିଟୋ 1961 64 ରେ କାଇରୋରେ ହେଇଥିଲା 67 ରେ ହବା କଥା ଯୋଉ ଜାଗାରେ ହେଇପାରିଲା ନାହିଁ ସେଠି ମିଲିଟାରୀ ରୁଲ ହେଲା 1970, 73, 76, 79 Havana, ତାପରେ ହବା କଥା ଇରାକରେ ସେଠି ନ ହେଇପାରିକିରି ବାଗଦାଦରେ ନ ହେଇପାରିକିରି by default India got in 1983. 1983 India ରେ ହେଲା ନର୍ମାଲ କନଫରେନ୍ସ ତାପରେ 1986 ରେ ହରାରେ 1989 ରେ ହେଲା Belgrade again. And that in that ninth conference, looking at the Star War program and looking at Perestroika and the Glasnost program of Soviet Union, these countries they decided to organize the advanced countries among this non-allied group, G15. So G15 was born in 1989. ଏବଂ 1998 ରେ जो एशियन टाइगर मानकर जो फॉल पर जो फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस ହେଲା ସେତେବେଳେ G20 ଗଢା ହେଲା କେବଳ फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर और रिजर्व बैंक ବା सेंट्रल बैंक ର गवर्नर ମାନଙ୍କୁ ନେଇକି 2008 ମସିହାରେ जो फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस ହେଲା it was elevated to the level of the summit केवल head of the state and government ମାନେ ଆସିଲେ. So when we look at present context, what kind of financial crisis we are going through, what kind of situation, making a situational analysis, you'll know what kind of situation we are facing. So looking at this down the memory lane from civilizational route to the formation of G15, formation of NAM first, then G15, and also contributing to the growth of G20 where India is a original member, like India was an original member of League of Nations and United Nations during its formation days. So India can contribute a lot. And this contribution is not India-centric. India gives the leadership. India is a leader and is a born leader. It's a leader not in style. Don't look at Narendra Modi alone. Narendra Modi we are glad that during this particular juncture, we are having a prime minister who knows his job, who knows what are the briefs for him, and he knows how to tackle the situation. That is the situation where our Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, and one future matters for us. Thank you very much.
राजनीति विज्ञान वरिष्ठ प्रोफेसर एवं ओडिशार अन्यतम चिंतानायक प्रोफेसर सृजनार मिश्र को धन्यवाद से अति सुंदर भाव अभिज्ञता एवं परिवर्तित परिस्थिति G20 भारत नेतृत्व किभली वसुधैव कुटुंबकम को आनी पारिबो ताको विस्तृत भाव में बुझेइछन्ति. Now I take this opportunity of inviting Professor Ajit Mahanti, who extensively speaks on the democratization of education and globalization of education, and how globalization is impacting education and simultaneously being impacted by education. That will be his concluding remarks for the benefit of all the participants from Utkal University and all other intellectuals sitting here. Thank you.
The main point that I would like to make, again arising out of what Surya has already said, is that globalization need not be equated with the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That's partly because I think globalization has in its reality, in its real impact, taken us away from the ideology of one world, ideology of one family. Because if you look underneath the whole idea of globalization and the processes, they have led to subjugation and colonization in a different form. And that is probably why, as a result of globalization, we have become more self-conscious because we are now more conscious of our status in a hierarchized world. You keep repeatedly hearing the glory of Odisha in the past, the glory of India in the past. That's an offshoot of the underpinnings of globalization uh, in the world, which has made us more conscious of the hierarchy. So the point that I would like to make is that in order to think of the ideology of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one did not really fall back on globalization as a process. Because if you look at the origin of globalization, how did it start? It was actually a sort of programming agentic process. It's not agentless. It's some people, some countries were doing it, some forces were doing it. So globalization is actually a totalizing agentic process of imposed homogenization. See, diversity of nature, diversity of cultures, diversity of languages, diversity of traditions, customs, habits, patterns of living, diversity of climate is a natural phenomenon, is inescapable phenomenon. You cannot create physically a uniform world because the world by nature is diverse. But what was happening in the face of um, globalization was some kind of imposed homogenization in the face of what I have described as natural and insuppressible diversity. Globalization actually sought to project an illusion of being an agentless process of ostensibly autonomous market economy. We all talked about globalization arising out of global market economy and all that. And we thought that that global market economy was thriving on the progressive insignificance of nation states, because nation states were gradually becoming less significant. Governance as a process was becoming less important for the people. And therefore, globalization as a process actually took over to de-emphasize the act of governance. But then globalization, when you look at what exactly is happening, globalization could not escape the tag of imposed American imperialism, or at least its more soft version of Americanization, McDonaldization, and so on. The territory-based national cultures or subcultures appear too narrow when you talk of a globalized world. Then talking of small cultures, talking of territories and all that became too narrow, limiting the impact to be universal or truly global. Cultures were changing, but still remain rooted. So that's one of the main aspects of what happened as a result of globalization. Cultures were remained in flux, but when you look at the people who are marginalized, the tribal people, for example, they still, in despite all the globalization, they remain rooted in their culture, thankfully, because the economic impact of globalization could not reach the downtrodden, could not reach the subjugated, could not reach the disadvantaged populations. So, in effect, in terms of its economic impact, globalization actually has widened the gaps between the uh, different segments of the society, where 1% perhaps enjoy 1% of the population enjoy 70% of the national wealth. and about 10% capture 19% of the national wealth. Therefore, as long as you have that kind of a disparity inherent as a result of globalization, it's probably not possible to talk of some kind of transcultural cosmopolitanism. So, what we need to think is that in the name of globalization, in the name of cosmopolitanism, we are actually perpetuating the old colonial traditions. Colonialism has never deserted us. Empires of the state have been taken over by empires in the mind. That is, I think somebody had said, the empires of future will be empires of the mind. So earlier, in the so-called pre-colonial era, nation states or people were colonized, they were subjugated. Now that period of geographical bounded colonization is gone. What is happening is colonization of human mind. Therefore, the so-called modern uh, 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 youth, the Western educated system is actually perpetuating the American, Western, British or global North kind of a culture, which is imposed on the value system which were intrinsic to a particular culture. So we need to think as to what exactly is happening. Are we really globalized in the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam sense, or are we globalized just to perpetuate the kind of hierarchy, the difference between not the first, second, and third world, but perhaps now the global south and the global north? So we need to ask ourselves: are we, in name of globalization, are we really creating our own salvation? Are we creating our own upliftment? That we need to know, because cosmopolitanism actually is transcultural, global, and inclusive consciousness. That is what I would like to argue. That also the globalization as a perpetuation of hierarchy and for new form of colonization of human minds and human cultures is perhaps not giving us what one would think of as the ideology of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. What we have instead is perhaps a hierarchy which has to be replaced by what I think a kind of a transcultural cosmopolitanism, that is transcultural, global, and an inclusive consciousness, transcending cultural or national or kinship ties. It is the realization that the whole world is but one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So cosmopolitan consciousness, however, cannot be blind to differences, not to the local differences, nor to the local traditions as sites of negotiation of human dignity, freedom, and right. So what I'm arguing is that in order to be truly cosmopolitan, in order to reach the status of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, we did not forgo our own cultures, our own roots, our own traditions. I have written severally about it, that in order to really be cosmopolitan, in order to really achieve the ideology of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, in order to go back to the tradition of, Mo jibana pache narke paditha jagato uddhara heu, in order to get that kind of situation, you have to remain rooted. You cannot escape the rootedness of your own culture. You cannot deny your own traditions, your own customs. and be cosmopolitan or be belong to a global family or Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. You cannot do that. So my argument is that in order for a person to, or person or a group or a community to be really globalized, to be really cosmopolitan, to be really transcultural, one has to remain rooted in one's own culture and tradition and have a consciousness of a sort of consciousness and some kind of empathetic relationship with the entire world. I have worked with the tribal communities who do not know anything about the world, but they have a sense of rootedness in their own culture. At the same time, they have a kind of a empathy, they have a kind of compassion for the mankind. That kind of consciousness is what is real, the root of being cosmopolitan, belonging to one family and one world. You cannot create one world by defying your own culture. You cannot create one world by homogenizing all the cultures into Americanization and so on. That is what actually globalization is working at. Globalization is working in Americanizing the entire world, and that itself is counterproductive to the ideology of one family, one world. Because as long as there is a hierarchy, you cannot remain in a family. A family doesn't actually conceive of a hierarchy as it is. You know, think of the way we conduct ourselves. You know, even when we glorify our own traditions, we glorify our own democracy, we glorify our own ancient history and so on. What do we do? When we conduct ourselves in a public sphere, we cannot escape English. You know, this is just one example. I'm not, not talking about English as such, but it's one example. In 1990, a Britisher who had worked long years in British Council, which was promoting English language, he came up with a groundbreaking book called Linguistic Imperialism. That book has gone through 8 editions already, published initially by Oxford. It has gone through 8 editions. The main argument that Robert Phillipson offered there is that the new form of imperialism is being perpetuated through English language, the dominance of English language. Why is it that in order to glorify my own tradition, in order to glorify my own history, I have to speak in English? You know, why is it? You know, I can speak in Odia. I'm glad that Surya spoke in Odia. But it has become an unwritten norm in our formal gatherings and meetings to speak in English. And that's why I thought, I have prepared myself to speak in English. କିନ୍ତୁ ପ୍ରକୃତରେ ଆପଣମାନେ ଯଦି ଭାବିବେ ଯେ ଯୋଉ ଜଗତୀକରଣ କଥା କୁହାହଉଛି ବା ଯୋଉ ନୂଆ ଅର୍ଥନୈତିକ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା ବିଷୟରେ କୁହାହଉଛି, ଏ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା ଆମ ମାନଙ୍କ ଭିତରେ ଏତେ ଥାକ ଥାକ ଶ୍ରେଣୀରେ ଆମ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ବିଭକ୍ତ କରିଛି ଯେ ସେଠି ଆମେ ଯୋଉ ଆଦର୍ଶ କଥା କହୁଛୁ, ଜଗତୀକରଣର ଆଦର୍ଶ ବା ବସୁଧୈବ କୁଟୁମ୍ବକର ଆଦର୍ଶ, ସେ ଆଦର୍ଶ ଏଠି ହେଇପାରିବ ନାହିଁ। କାହିଁକି ନା ଆମମାନଙ୍କ ଉପରେ ଲଦା ହେଇଛି ଆମେରିକାନାଇଜେସନର ବୋଝ। ଯୋଉ କଥାଟା ମୁଁ କହିଲି ଯେ ଆପଣମାନେ ଗୋଟେ ଇଣ୍ଟରନ୍ୟାସନାଲ ଫ୍ଲାଇଟ୍ ଭିତରକୁ ପଶି ଯାଆନ୍ତୁ, ଦେଖିବେ ବିଭିନ୍ନ ପ୍ରକାର ଲୋକ, ବିଭିନ୍ନ ଦେଶର ଲୋକ, ବିଭିନ୍ନ ଜାତିର ଲୋକ, ବିଭିନ୍ନ ପ୍ରକାରର ଲୋକ, ବିବିଧ ସଂସ୍କୃତି, ବିବିଧ ପରମ୍ପରାର ଲୋକ, ବିଭିନ୍ନ ଖାଦ୍ୟ ପସନ୍ଦର ଲୋକ, ସାଙ୍କ ଭିତରେ ସେଇଠି ଯୋଉଟା ଯେ ଆପଣ ଭାବିବେ ଯେ ପ୍ରକୃତରେ ଏଇଠି ବୋଧେ ଗୋଟେ ଗ୍ଲୋବାଲ ଭିଲେଜ ସୃଷ୍ଟି ହେଇଛି, ସେଇଠି ଆପଣ ଦେଖିବେ ତା ଭିତରେ କେତେ ହାୟରାର୍କି ଅଛି, କେତେ ବିବିଧତା ଅଛି। ତେଣୁ ଯୋଉ ପ୍ରୋସେସ ଗୁଡାକ ଯୋଉ ଗ୍ଲୋବାଲାଇଜେସନ ଯୋଉଟା ଆମମାନଙ୍କୁ ଆମର ଯୋଉ ପ୍ରକୃତିଗତ ବିବିଧତା ଅଛି ସେ ବିବିଧତାଟାକୁ ଜଳାଞ୍ଜଳି ଦେଇକିରି ଆମକୁ ଏକାଠି କରିଦେଇକିରି ଗୋଟେ ଆମେରିକାନ ଟ୍ରାଡିସନ ଭିତରେ ଭର୍ତ୍ତି କରିଦେବା ଏବଂ ସମସ୍ତେ ଆମେ ଇଂରେଜୀ ମ୍ୟୁଜିକ ଏବଂ ଇଂରେଜୀ ଜାଜ୍ ମ୍ୟୁଜିକ ଇତ୍ୟାଦି ଶୁଣିବା, ଇଂରେଜୀ ଡ୍ୟାନ୍ସ କରିବା ଏବଂ ଆମର ଜନ୍ମଦିନରେ ଆମ ପରମ୍ପରା ଭୁଲିକିରି ଆମେ ହାପି ବାର୍ଥଡେ ବୋଲି ଗୀତ ଗାଇବା। ଇଏ ହଉଛି ଗ୍ଲୋବାଲାଇଜେସନ ଇମ୍ପାକ୍ଟ। ଆପଣ ମାନେ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଗାଁ ଗହଳିକି ଯାଆନ୍ତୁ, ସେଠି ମଧ୍ୟ କେକ୍ କଟା ହଉଛି, ଆଉ ପିଠା ନାହିଁ। ଆମ ଯୋଉ ବୋଉ ଯୋଉ ପିଠା କରୁଥିଲା ଜନ୍ମଦିନରେ ସେ ପିଠା ଆଉ କ୍ଷୀରି ଆଉ ନାହିଁ, ସେ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ କେକ୍ କଟା ହଉଛି, ହାପି ବାର୍ଥଡେ ବୋଲା ହଉଛି, ସମସ୍ତେ କରୁଛନ୍ତି ହାପି ବାର୍ଥଡେ। ସେ ପାଠ ପଢିଥାନ୍ତୁ ନ ପଢିଥାନ୍ତୁ ସମସ୍ତେ ହାପି ବାର୍ଥଡେ କହୁଛନ୍ତି, ସମସ୍ତେ ଭାଲେଣ୍ଟାଇନ ଡେ କରୁଛନ୍ତି। ଭାଲେଣ୍ଟାଇନ ଡେ କୋଉଠୁ ଆସିଲା? ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ପ୍ରୋସେସ ଏଗୁଡା ହଉଛି ଗ୍ଲୋବାଲାଇଜେସନ। ମୁଁ ଲେଖିଛି ଏ ବିଷୟରେ ଭାଲେଣ୍ଟାଇନ ଡେ, କୋଟି କୋଟି ଟଙ୍କାର କାର୍ଡ ବିଜନେସ, କାର୍ଡ ଓ ଉପହାର ବିଜନେସ, ଯୋଉଟା କି ମଲ୍ଟିନ୍ୟାସନାଲ କର୍ପୋରେସନ ମାନେ ଏ ଦେଶରେ ପ୍ଲାଣ୍ଟିଂ କରିଛନ୍ତି, ଏ ଦେଶରେ ଆଣିକି ରଖିଛନ୍ତି। କାହିଁକି ନା ଭାରତ ବର୍ଷରେ ଏତେ ଲୋକ ଅଛନ୍ତି ଯେ ଅନ୍ତତଃ 10% ଲୋକ ଯଦି ଭାଲେଣ୍ଟାଇନ ଡେ କାର୍ଡ କିଣନ୍ତି ତାହେଲେ କର୍ପୋରେଟ ଯୋଉମାନେ କର୍ପୋରେଟ ପ୍ରମୋଟ କରୁଛନ୍ତି ସେମାନେ ମାଲାମାଲ ହେଇଯିବେ। ତେଣୁ ଆପଣ ମାନେ ଚିନ୍ତା କରନ୍ତୁ ଯେ ଆମେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ବସୁଧୈବ କୁଟୁମ୍ବକମ କଥା କହୁଛୁ, ଯେତେବେଳେ ଆମେ ଚିନ୍ତା କରୁଛୁ ଯେ ଗୋଟେ ସାରା ବିଶ୍ୱଟା ଗୋଟାଏ ପରିବାର ଭଳିଆ ହେଇଯାଆନ୍ତା, ସମସ୍ତେ ଆମର ନିଜର ହେଇଯାଆନ୍ତେ, ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କ ସହିତ ଆମର ସହାନୁଭୂତି ରହନ୍ତା, ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କ ସହିତ ଆମର ସମ୍ବେଦନଶୀଳତା ରହନ୍ତା, ସେ ସମୟରେ ଆମେ ଯଦି ପରସ୍ପରକୁ ଥାକ ଥାକରେ ବାଣ୍ଟିଛୁ, ଆମେ ଯଦି ଆମର ମନଟା ବା ମୁଣ୍ଡଟା ଯଦି କବ୍ଜା ପଡିଯାଇଛି ଇଂରେଜୀ ଦ୍ୱାରା ବା ଆମେରିକାନ ଇକୋନୋମି ଦ୍ୱାରା, ତାହେଲେ ଆମେ ବୋଧହୁଏ ଗ୍ଲୋବାଲାଇଜ ହେଇନୁ ଏପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ, ବା ଯୋଉଟା ଟ୍ରୁଲି ଗ୍ଲୋବାଲାଇଜ ବା ଗ୍ଲୋବାଲ ଫ୍ୟାମିଲି ସେଟା ଆମେ ହେଇନୁ। ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ହଉଛି ତାର କାରଣ ହଉଛି American economy will never thrive unless they have weapon to sell. ପୃଥିବୀର ବିଭିନ୍ନ ଜାଗାରେ ଯଦି ପରସ୍ପର ଭିତରେ କନ୍ଦଳ ନଥିବ ଏବଂ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ହଉନଥିବ ଏବଂ ସେମାନଙ୍କର ଅସ୍ତ୍ର ଶସ୍ତ୍ର ଦରକାର ପଡୁନଥିବ, ତାହେଲେ ଆମେରିକାନ ଇକୋନୋମି ଡୁବିଯିବ। ଅଲରେଡି ତ ବହୁତ ଲୋନ କରିସାରିଲେଣି ସେମାନେ। ତେଣୁ ଆପଣ ମାନେ ଭାବିବା ଦରକାର ଯେ ଗୋଟାଏ ବ୍ରିଟିଶ ଆମେରିକାନ ବା ଗ୍ଲୋବାଲ ନର୍ଥର ଇମ୍ପୋଜିସନ has created this same feeling of globalization, and that itself has to be distanciated from the ideology of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That's probably all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
ତେଣୁ ଆଜି ଭଳି ଗୋଟେ ସ୍ମରଣୀୟ ଦିନରେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଆମେ ଉତ୍କଳ ଗୌରବ ମଧୁସୂଦନ ଦାସଙ୍କର ଜନ୍ମଦିନ ପାଳନ କରୁଛୁ, ଏଭଳି ଦିବସରେ ଗ୍ଲୋବାଲାଇଜେସନ, ଜଗତୀକରଣ ଏବଂ G20 ବସୁଧୈବ କୁଟୁମ୍ବକମ ସନ୍ଦର୍ଭ ଉପରେ ଯୋଉ ଆୟୋଜିତ ହୋଇଥିଲା କର୍ମଶାଳା, ଆଜିର ଆଲୋଚନା ଚକ୍ରରେ ପ୍ରଫେସର ଅଜିତ ମହାନ୍ତି ତାଙ୍କର ଅଧ୍ୟକ୍ଷ ଅଭିଭାଷଣ ପ୍ରଦାନ କଲେ ଏବଂ ମତେ ମଡରେଟର ହିସାବରେ ଶେଷରେ ମୁଁ ସମ୍ୟକରେ ଗୋଟିଏ ଧାଡ଼ି କହିବି। ପ୍ରଫେସର ସୂର୍ଯ୍ୟନାରାୟଣ ମିଶ୍ର ତାଙ୍କର ବକ୍ତବ୍ୟରେ ମିଳିତ ଜାତିସଂଘଠାରୁ ଆରମ୍ଭ କରି ଭାରତର ଏପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ ରାଜନୈତିକ ଇଚ୍ଛା ଶକ୍ତି ଏବଂ ଦୃଢ଼ତା ଉପରେ ମତ ଦେଲେ। କରୋନା ଭଳି ଜଟିଳ ପରିସ୍ଥିତିରେ ଆମେ କିଭଳି ସଫଳ ମୁକାବିଲା କରିବା ସହିତ ବିଶ୍ୱ ଆଗରେ ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ରଗତିଶୀଳ ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ରର ଭୂମିକା ତୁଲେଇଲୁ ତା ଉପରେ ବିଶଦ ଭାବରେ କହିଲେ ଏବଂ ଯୁକ୍ତରାଷ୍ଟ୍ର ଆମେରିକା ସହିତ ମଧ୍ୟ ତୁଳନା କରି କହିଲେ। ସାରଙ୍କର ନିର୍ଯାସ ଭିତରେ ସବୁଠୁ ଭଲ ଲାଇନଟା ଥିଲା, the soldiers won the war and the statesmen lost the peace. ତେଣୁ ଷ୍ଟେଟ୍ସମ୍ୟାନ ଆଉ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ ଭିତରେ ଫରକଟା ସେ ବୁଝେଇଦେଲେ। ପ୍ରଫେସର ଅଜିତ ମହାନ୍ତିଙ୍କର ସବୁଠୁ ଯଦି ନିର୍ଯାସ ହିସାବରେ ଗୋଟେ କଥା ଧରାଯାଏ, ସେଇଟା ହଉଛି ଯେ ଗ୍ଲୋବାଲାଇଜେସନ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ କଲୋନାଇଜେସନ ଯୋଉଟା ଥିଲା ଫିଜିକାଲ କଲୋନାଇଜେସନ, ସେଟା କଲୋନାଇଜେସନ ଅଫ ମାଇଣ୍ଡରେ ପରିଣତ ହେଇଛି। ତେଣୁ ଏମ୍ପାୟାର୍ସ ଆର୍ ନାଉ ବିଲ୍ଡ ଇନ୍ ମାଇଣ୍ଡସ୍। ମୁଁ ସାରଙ୍କ କଥାରେ ଶେଷରେ ଗୋଟେ ଧାଡ଼ି କହିବି ग्लोबलाइजेशन ऊपर जो सबुठु भल बही लिखा है फ्रीडमैन कर आपण मानको निश्चित पढ़िथिबे बहुत जण वर्ल्ड इज फ्लैट सेतरे से गोटे बहुत भल कथा लिखी चंदी यू कैन नॉट एस्केप ग्लोबलाइजेशन यू क्लोज द डोर्स से कहउचंदी यू क्लोज द डोर्स इट इज इन द विंडोज यू शट द विंडोज इट्स इन द केबल यू कट द केबल इट्स इन योर माइंड तेणु आपण ग्लोबलाइजेशन को घृणा करि पारंती आपण ग्लोबलाइजेशन को प्रत्याख्यान करि पारंती ग्लोबलाइजेशन को एस्केप करि परिबे यू कैन नॉट सी कहउचंदी ग्लोबलाइजेशन इज नाउ मोर डेंजरस देन 9/11 अटैक 9/11 अटैक को आपण सैन्य बाहिनी लगै कि बंद कर दे परिबे यू कैन नॉट स्टॉप ग्लोबलाइजेशन मोर मन अछि बहुत दिन तले भारत रे ग्लोबलाइजेशन विरुद्ध रे तले स्वर उठिला कहले हम सब विदेशी चैनल ऊपर रोक लगैबू जो माने विभिन्न जिंस अश्लील जिंस स्प्रेड करछथि ए करछथि मु सेतले प्रथम भाबिले माने केमति रोक लगैबे परे जणा पड़ला जे माने रोक लगैबा संभव पर नुहे कारण इट्स एन एरा ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन आपण पृथ्वी रे इंफॉर्मेशन को ब्लॉक करि परिबे सेल का ऊपर रोक लगैबे कहले स्टार टीवी जी टीवी ए सब जो विदेश रो जो टेलीकास्ट करछथि ता ऊपर रोक लगाय परे जणा पड़ला स्टार टीवी हांगकांग रो टेलीकास्ट करूची सैटेलाइट टेलीविजन फॉर एशिया रीजन आ जी टीवी सिंगापुर रो टेलीकास्ट करूची आपण जानछन एटा बफर देश आ ऊपर कोनोसी देशर नियंत्रण नाही तेणु आपण मोर मन अछि बहुत दिन तळे रामदेव बाबा गोटे स्वर उठेले विदेश रो कला धन फेरै आछि सेतळे कथा उठला के फेरैबो केमति फेरैबो ना स्विस बैंक रो हमें सब जो गच्छित अछि फेरै आछि परे जणा पडिला मोर भी सेतळे जे धारणा थिला गोटे स्विस बैंक बोली गोटे बैंक अछि जार ना स्विस बैंक जोथिरे सब कला धन रखा जाय परे जणा पडला बैंकिंग इज ए डोमेस्टिक इंडस्ट्री इन स्विट्जरलैंड प्रत्येक लोक गोटे परमिशन नै कि घर गोटे बैंक खोली परिबो एवं से बैंक बदल रे से सरकार को किछि पैसा दबो टैक्स भली बैंक चलाउची बोली किंतु गवर्नमेंट रो भी गोटे एथिक्स अछि गवर्नमेंट विल नॉट इंटरफियर इन द बैंकिंग एक्टिविटीज ऑफ इंडिविजुअल्स सेहि पई समझते सेठी पैसा रखुछन किए कोन रखिला तार हिसाब सरकार को पाखे भी नाही तेनु आपण सुनिथिबे गोटे कमिशन गठन होला कला धन फेरेवा पई हमर ओडिसा रे जने विचारपति भी तार उपाध्यक्ष हेले जस्टिस अरिजीत प्रसाद आपण सुनी आश्चर्य हेबे कमिशन गठन रे जेति पैसा खर्च होला सेति पैसा भी रिकवर ही परले सो ग्लोबलाइजेशन इज नाउ सच ए फोर्स हमर जो G20 इकोनॉमिक सम्मेलन रो गोटे मूल उद्देश्य होची एठी बेसी नैतिकता एथिक्स से सब कहवा अपेक्षा एठी अर्थनीति ऊपर जोर दिया जाउची अर्थनीति जदि सुदृढ़ होबो देश सुदृढ़ होबो तेणु मु शेष रे गोटे कथा कहि क्लोज करिवि मॉडरेटर हिसाब रे मोर सूर्य सागर गोटे भल कथा कहले इतिहास विषय रे कलिंग युद्ध आमे सब बेले को दी प्रकार ठक अछन विश्व गोटे ठक ऐतिहासिक गोटे ऐतिहासिक ठक ऐतिहासिक ठक माने ब्रिटिश अमल रो ठक मुगल अमल रो ठक और ठक ऐतिहासिक माने जो इतिहास को निज अनुसार बदलेबा को चेष्टा करछ आपण जानछन गोटे आमे गोटे समय रे इतिहास पढिलु महात्मा गांधी तापरे इंदिरा गांधी महात्मा गांधी तापरे जवाहरलाल नेहरू तापरे इंदिरा गांधी तापरे राजीव गांधी इत्यादि करिकि पटेल शास्त्री फास्त्री छोट छोट चित्र करिकि चारि सजै करी आमे इतिहास बुझी परवर्ती समय कहले ना ना इतिहास प्रति अन्याय हिची इतिहास को बदलै दिया जे सब गांधी बंदी को साइड कर दे करी मालवीय मुखर्जी सब ऐड करा गेल वर्तमान प्रॉब्लम होची जो पिलाटा नवम जाय पढिची कांग्रेस गवर्नमेंट रे आ दशम पर पढिला आ गोटे गवर्नमेंट रे सी सार को पचरची कोटा सार इतिहास रे लिखिया सी जोडा आगरु पढितलु लिखिवा ना एबे जोडा लिखिवा टीचर माने भी चाला के गेले कोथिन गवर्नमेंट परीक्षा बळे देखो की गवर्नमेंट रे अछि सेही अनुसार लिखियो जहा जो गवर्नमेंट दिवो सेही अनुसार लिखियो तेनो इतिहास को जो माने निज अनुसार बदलैबा को चेष्टा करंती सेतबे को जाय इफ यू टेंड टू फॉरगेट हिस्ट्री हिस्ट्री रिपीट्स इटसेल्फ मु क्लोजिंग रे गोटे लाइन कहबी आम बळे मैट्रिक परीक्षा रे गोटे क्वेश्चन पड़तिला कलिंग जो आज रो टॉपिक से तो बहुत संपर्क अछि ओडिसा केमति विश्ववासी को देखैछि स्ट्रेटजी कोन आम बळे गोटे क्वेश्चन पड़तिला इतिहास रे कलिंग युद्धर विवरणी लेख आपण जानछन से समय आम समय रे मोबाइल फोन नथिला जेरॉक्स भी भलरे बाहर नथिला हमें मैट्रिक परीक्षा बळे जो कॉपी देलु सर्टिफिकेट से जेरॉक्स टा गोटे आपण गोटे सर्टिफिकेट रे कॉपी पाइबा पई 20 मिनिट वेट करिया पड़ुतला से गोटे डबा भीतर सर्टिफिकेट टा पुरेबो त गोटे बाली बळिया ये रे बुलेबो 15 मिनिट बुलेला परे त काढी कि गोटे खरा रे सुखेइबो तापर त पानी रे बुडी कि गोटे कागज टा आपण दबो जोटा 15 मिनिट परे देखा जिवो एटा होतला गोटे फोटोकॉपी तेणु से समय रे नथिला गोटे खाता किंतु एते भल लागिला जने टीचर को से खाता को से टीचर वैल्यूएशन सेंटर रो आनी समाज ऑफिस को आसते आम बैच रे बाहर कलिंग युद्धर बरणी लेख से पिलाटा एक्चुअली कलिंग युद्ध विषय किसी जानी खाली जानी दया नदी कूल सार जो कहले अशोक सैन्य कलिंग सैन्य भितर तेणु से कौन लिख 8 से 25 मार्क क्वेश्चन मिनिमम 4 पृष्ठा लिखा पड़ू से पिला 8 पृष्ठा लिखी खाली जानी एति मसीह कहुए इन हिस्ट्री everything is false except names and dates, and in literature everything is true except names and dates. साहित्य रे नाम और तारीख को छाड़िले सब किछि सत, इतिहास रे नाम और तारीख को छाड़िले बाकी कोन वर्तमान आपन को अशोकन शिलालेख रे या लिखाई छि के लिखि छि के पढी जानि छि ना भारत रे 2 जण पढी जानि छथि जण कोन कोजन के बुझी पर ना जे आ जणे तांकर समय पढिले तेणु किए कोन प्रकृत इंटरप्रेट करू छि दैट इज द क्वेश्चन से पिलाटी कोन आंसर लिखि देला एति मसिया रे धौली पहाड़ तले दया नदी कूल रे कलिंग युद्ध हैला कलिंग सैन्य और अशोक सैन्य भितर नदी एपटे अशोक सैन्य छिड़ा हेले नदी सेपटे कलिंग सैन्य छिड़ा हेले तापर बाजा बाजिला लड़ाई आरंभ होला एपटू सैन्य आसिले एपटू गले पुणी लड़ाई होला पुणी मेंचे मरले पुणी सैन्य आसिले एमती 4 पृष्ठा लिखि सैन्य आसिले गले पुणी लड़ाई होला पुणी मरले से जो टीचर गार्ड पड़ते से कहले तो केबे पाठ पढ़े नहीं एते लिखि जाय ता पाखु जेतल गला से कहला सर शेडटे बुली आसन मोडे लेखिया चांस पाई काई छ आसिला परे लास्ट जो 5 मिनिट कहन दिस टीच ऑफ योर आंसर शीट्स लास्ट 5 मिनिट्स टू गो से टीचर खाता न छड़ेबो जाउतले कहला सर टी गोटे खाली शब्द लिखिला भलो हला घंटा बाजिला युद्ध एटी शेष हला नले आउरी सैन्य आस्तांते आउरी मरता एटा को आमे से तळे थट्टा बाउतु मु खाली क्लोजिंग रे एती कहबे एटा को आमे थट्टा बाउतु आपण जानछन वर्तमान 2 जण प्रसिद्ध ऐतिहासिक नंदिनी सतपति हम गण रे नाहंती नंदिनी सतपति गोटे प्रथम एकांकिका लिखिला आ ऊपर सेकंड आंध्र प्रदेश रो पूर्वतन महामहिम राज्यपाल और आज छत्तीसगढ़ रो राज्यपाल श्री विश्वभूषण हरिचंदन नाउ दे आर प्रमोटिंग द थ्योरी जे प्रकृत रे अशोक कोन जो हिंसा प्रणोदित तरबार रो जय जय नुहे मनुष्यर हृदय जय प्रकृत जय एटा कहिकरी अस्त्र त्याग कले ना ओडिया पीपल फोर्स्ड अशोक टू ड्रॉप द स्वॉर्ड ओडिया लोक बाध्य कले अशोक को अस्त्र त्याग करिया पई द स्ट्रेटजी मेड बाय कारुवाकी वर्तमान ता ऊपर गवेषणा चलछि आपण सुनी आश्चर्य हेबे ई जो पिलाटा जो आंसर लिखितिला आमे एटा थट्टा भाबुतिलु किंतु वर्तमान ऐतिहासिक मान बुली बुली से आंसर को जाउछि शेषरे क्लोजिंग रे सेटा कहिकरी क्लोज कर सेटा होछि आपण जानि जे अशोक जो समय रे आसिले ओडिसा रे की राजा नथि ओडिसा रा राजा शଯ୍ୟାଶାयୀ थिले अजना रोग रे आपण सेतले राजा माने विभिन्न विलास बेसन रे रहउतिले की को रोग थिला एचआईवी पेचआई बळिया हेतिओ कि जणा नथिले किंतु राजा शଯ୍ୟାଶାयୀ थिले राजांकर पालित कन्या थिले कारुबाकी कारुबाकी को पाट महारानी कहले यू हैव टू टेक ओवर जेहेतु अशोक आश्चर्य आ जानिबे जे ओडिसा रे की राजा बजा नाथि सेना हमको पोको माछ बळिया साथ कहते केते लोक थे भी जना नथिला सैन्य कारुबाकी कहले मु अनभिज्ञ समर कला रे मोर किछि निपुणता नाही मते आपण काई दायित्व दउछन रानी कहले यू आर वेरी इंटेलिजेंट तमे बेसी पाठशाला न पढि थाई पार बट यू कैन मैनेज कारुबाकी टुक ओवर आपण जानछन कारुबाकी जो सिनेमा रे देखिछि शाहरुख खान सहित सेते मसला एलिमेंट ऐड हेछि किंतु कारुबाकी वाज एक्सट्रीमली इंटेलिजेंट गर्ल सी गोटे भलो डिसीजन नेले से कहले गोटे से खबर पाई जाइथिले जे सेनापति राजा में सपक्ष नांदी सेनापति को ऊपर निर्भर करले युद्ध हारिबा तेणु से कहले गोटे सेनापति युद्ध चलेबेनी चारिटा जन सेनापति चारि कोण रे युद्ध चलेबे गार लोकन भीतर सेनापति बचा होला आ से माने विभिन्न एंगल रो युद्ध चलेले कारुबाकी गोटे भलो डिसीजन देले कहले आपण माने जेतेबेले जाउछंती नदी कूल को नित्यकर्म सारिबा जाउछंती गोटे हिकरी जीवेनी दल दल हिकरी जीवे 100-150 लोक होइकरी जिबे आ 100-150 लोक रे फेरिबे किछि नहले भी गोटे खर्दा गामचा बलिया मुंडरे बांधी थिबे गोटे बाड़ी बलिया धरथिबे ए जो लोक माने सब अनाउंस हे गेला गां रे डेंगुरा पटिगिरी जे केही एकुटिया नई कूल को जीवनी जेतेबेले जीवो 250-300 रे जीवो पुणी फेरिबो किछि दिन परे जो अशोकंकर सेनापति जो बायनाकुलर तो नथिला जो बाउंस नळी पळे रे देखुतिले सी जे अशोकन कहले सर ए तो ओडिसा रो आमे फेरिकरी जीवा एठी हताश हे आमे पाटना आपण जानि जे जो पाटोडी पुत्र रो आस्तिले सेटा आजिरो पाटना ना एते दूर रो आसीचु हम ओडिया माने हरै देबे अशोक विरक्त हे कहले कोन आमे तो गुडाय सफा कर सारलेनी तांग लोकन को आपण केमती भावुଛନ୍ତି ओडिया हरेई देबे से कहला सर आपनकर सेनापति देखंतु से कहले महाराज देखंतु जेतिकी लोक मरुଛନ୍ତି तार डबल लोक आसुଛନ୍ତି दल दल ये आसुଛନ୍ତି अनौଛନ୍ତି केते लोक मले पुणी बुलिकिरी आसुଛନ୍ତି आउथरे जॉइन करछ आ एई रेट रे चलले तो आम सैन्य सफा होई जिवो अशोक कहले कोन करिया पड़िवो ना एटा बढ़िया समय आज्ञा ओडिसा रे बुद्ध धर्म बहुत व्यापिलानी ललितगिरी उदयगिरी खंडगिरी सब आडे बुद्ध धर्म तेणु आप गोटे काम करूँ बौद्ध धर्म में दीक्षित होकर अस्त्र त्याग कली कहीकि ये गोटे दिन अस्त्र त्याग कर दिखाँ आप जो सोरिष पर्ष स्टोरी भी तैयारी कराई से अशोक सैन्य ही तैयारी कर राजा कहले जाई सोरिष गोटे घर खोजिक आण जो घरे कहीं भी मरी न गोटे भी घर पाइले जो कहीं भी मरी ना तेणु अशोक गोटे संध्यार डिक्लेयर कले हिंसा प्रणोदित तरबारी जय जय नुहे मनीषर हृदय जय ही प्रकृत जय बर्तमान विश्वभूषण हरिचंदन आ नंदिनी शतपथी आप गोटे एकांकिका लिखिं आप पढ़े एनसीईआरटी बही आम जो सेकेंडरी एजुकेशन बही रे +2 पिला प्रेस्क्राइब कराई एकांकिका पढ़ा जे अशोक प्रकृत में छाड़ी निज इच्छा गले ना ओडिया स्ट्राटेजी जो बाध्य होकर गले तेणु विश्वभूषण हरिचंदन बर्तमान दाबी उपस्थापन कर ओडिशा सरकार चेष्टा चलांतु जनइबा जे ओडिया लोक अशोक को बाध्य कले ओडिशा छाड़ी सो इतिहास को लेकर हिस्ट्री शुड बी ऑलवेज टेकन विथ अ पिंच ऑफ सॉल्ट मो शेषरे आई थैंक प्रोफेसर उपेंद्र पाड़ी ऑफ इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ मीडिया स्टडीज एंड आल्सो द वाइस चांसलर ऑफ दिस यूनिवर्सिटी प्रोफेसर सविता आचार्य एंड डायरेक्टर ऑफ स्टूडेंट्स वेलफेयर प्रोफेसर मिताली चिन्नारा हु आर सिटिंग हियर द एमिनेंट पैनलिस्ट प्रोफेसर सूर्यनारायण मिश्र द चेयरपर्सन प्रोफेसर अजित महांती for enlightening students on this occasion. I will end my last moderating speech with this famous poem by Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee. वसुधैव कुटुंबकम जदि गोटे कविता रे स्पष्ट भाव में जना पड़िबो से कविताटा होची एटा ता पूर्वरु जहांकर जन्मदिन आज पालन होची तांकर दुई पद कहबी मधुबाबू जो सेतबेले जातीयतार प्राणस्रोत ओडिसा रे जागृत करथिले तांकर कविता माध्यम रे से कवितार पटांतर नाही तादर दुई पद आमर आज दिन में मन रखा प्रति श्रद्धांजलि हम स्वार्थर वनिता अटे तोषा मद भय मिथ्या तांको पुत्र राज्य रे विपत्ति अवश्य घटिबो एमाने हेले एकत्र तोषा मद अटे अंधार बहिरी स्वार्थ तही लुचि बसे सरल पथिक सेवाटरे गले अकाल रे ताकु नासे जातिर उन्नति से काहू करिवो स्वार्थे जार व्यस्त मन सागुणा बिलुआ चिकित्सक हेले सब की पाइबो प्राण जाति नंदी घोष चलिबो कि भाई स्वार्थ को सारथी कले टाणे किरे गाड़ी दानार तोबड़ा घोड़ा मुहे बंधा थिले तुपरा बोला उत्कल संतान देवे किंपा एते भीरु तोहर जननी रोदन करिले कहिबा को किंपा डर तोहर जननी वीर प्रसविनी धूली रे पड़िछि देख ताहारी और से तांकरी और से जात होई तुई किपरि देखाउ मुख तेनु गोटे महाभारतीय चिंताधारा को जागृत करिया पई मधुबाबू एई वाणी रे कहितले अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी जो कविताटा कहते आज दिन में प्रणिधान योग्य कविताटा हूँ आदमी आज वसुधैव कुटुंबकम नीति सफल हम जदि आम सब मनीष को गोटे मनीष हिसाब से देखू ये प्रभाव प्रतिष्ठा प्रतिपत्ति रैंक प्रोफाइल अनुसार आम मनीष को देखा मनीष को मनीष हिसाब से देखा भारत शिखी इंसान जो आदमी जो कहते अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी एक्चुअली महिला को भी इंक्लूड कर कवितार ना हूँ आदमी से आदमी माने मनुष्य जाति को बुझी मुझे कविता कही क्लोज कर पेड़ पे खड़ा आदमी ऊंचा दिखता है जड़ पे पड़ा आदमी नीचा दिखता है आदमी ना ऊंचा होता है ना नीचा होता है ना बड़ा होता है ना छोटा होता है आदमी सिर्फ आदमी ही होता है मनुष्य भीतर बड़ सान ना आप देखो से क्या छाड़ना है तांकर दल लोगों को भी छाड़ना है सवाल ये नहीं कि आदमी कहाँ खड़ा है पथ पर या रथ पर से रथ उपर किए बसते आप जानते सी कहले रथ उपर बसीगले जन भगवान नहीं जीवन सवाल ये नहीं कि आदमी कहाँ खड़ा है पथ पर या रथ पर तट पर या बट पर तीर पर या प्राचीर पर निज को भी छाड़ना है प्रधानमंत्री पाचेरी ऊपर छिड़ा होते आप जानते लाल किला रे जो प्रधानमंत्री पताका टाणती से पाचेरीटा प्रधानमंत्री काली गली गली पड़े बोली गोटे पेंडाल कराई एक्चुअली पाचेरी धाराटा से तीर पर या प्राचीर पर सी कहते पाचेरी पर छिड़ाई गले जन महापुरुष हो जीवन सवाल ये नहीं कि आदमी कहाँ खड़ा है तट पर या बट पर पथ पर या रथ पर तीर पर या प्राचीर पर सवाल ये है कि आदमी जहां खड़ा है, सवाल ये है कि आदमी जहां खड़ा है या जहां उसे खड़ा होना पड़ा है उसकी पैरों के नीचे धरातल क्या है। तेणु लास्ट रे वाजपेयी गोटे लाइन में क्लोज कर एवरेस्ट के ऊंचाई पर अगर कोई साथी अपने दोस्त के साथ विश्वासघात करे, क्या वो गलती इसलिए माफ की जाएगी कि वो गलती एवरेस्ट के ऊंचाई पर हुई थी? नहीं, वो गलती गलती ही रहेगी। हिमालय की सारी धवलता उस कालिमा नहीं सकेगी। प्रभु मुझे इतनी ऊंचाई कभी ना देना कि औरों को गले ना लगा सकूं, इतनी रुखाई कभी ना देना। तेणु आम मातृभाषा रे ए कवितार गोटे धाड़ी रे जदि अनुवाद करा जाए, गोटे धाड़ी रे क्लोज करी, सबु जीवन स्वप्न नुहे, सबु स्वप्न जीवन नुहे। जीवन जदि स्वप्न न हैला आ स्वप्न जदि जीवन न हैला, से जीवन रो माने कोन आ से स्वप्न रो माने कोन। जय हिंद, वंदे उत्कल। वर्तमान आज जो वरेण्य प्रतिभा माने विशिष्ट चिंतानायक शिक्षाविद एठी उपस्थित अछंती, तांको संबर्धित करबा पई मु प्रोफेसर उपेंद्र पाड़ी को अनुरोध करूची, इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ मीडिया स्टडीज रा निर्देशक प्रोफेसर अजित महांती को प्रोफेसर उपेंद्र पाड़ी संबोधित करिवे। मु वर्तमान विशिष्ट शिक्षाविद प्रोफेसर सूर्यनारायण मिश्र को संबर्धित करबा पई प्रोफेसर उपेंद्र पाड़ी को अनुरोध करूची।
वर्तमान आमर आज तृतीय अधिवेशन जे थिले चेयरमैन एवं पैनल स्पीकर मॉडरेटर समस्त को मु आनुष्ठानिक भाव धन्यवाद एवं कृतज्ञता जनाऊँ। आज तृतीय अधिवेशन समाप्त करे उत्सव ओडिशा कार्यसूची अनुसार वर्तमान सांस्कृतिक कार्यक्रम परिवेषण करा। प्रथम पर्याय सांस्कृतिक कार्यक्रम आमर उत्कल विश्वविद्यालय छात्र छात्री मान पक्षर परिवेषण करा। आमर अन्य जो माने अच्छी वरिष्ठ आस्तिक जो माने जगन्नाथ संस्कृति निलय जो माने सब अच्छा कलाकार माने से माने कला नैपुण्य ये आमर ओडिसी नृत्य एवं संबलपुरी ग्रुप डांस ये सब कार्यक्रम परिवेषण हम। मु आशा करी आपण माने समस्ते ये उपस्थित रहिबे एवं जो माने सांस्कृतिक कार्यक्रम उत्सव ओडिशा प्रमुख अंग भाव ये मंच प्रदर्शन करेंगे। आपणकर उपस्थिति आपणकर करताली समस्त को उत्साहित करियो, किंतु से आपण माने के गुणा करिवे नाही बोली कि आपण मान को मोर निवेदन ए जो सांस्कृतिक कार्यक्रम हमर संध्या रे अनुष्ठित हबो। आ मु अनुरोध करिवि हमर प्रोफेसर डॉक्टर मिताली चिनारा डायरेक्टर स्टूडेंट वेलफेयर उत्कल विश्वविद्यालय जहाँ प्रेरणा रे ए कार्यक्रम सांस्कृतिक कार्यक्रम सब विभिन्न प्रतियोगिता 2 दिन धरिक विश्वविद्यालय मैडम अच्छा अनुरोध करी सांस्कृतिक संध्या कार्यक्रम को से परिचालन कर।